When Shushu opened her eyes, everything around was white. She thought she was in a temple, like the one she had once seen on TV. She felt like she had died again, and this was her second death. After that, she found herself in a strange place, and did not understand why she was in the body of a child. This death seemed different somehow. A man came up to her and asked if she had finished looking around. He informed her that Shushu was a candidate for regression, and in order to return back she needed to take on her true form. She had already lived 2 lives and had no memories of it. Shushu had black stars. Perhaps her death occurred under tragic circumstances. The main character's name is Shushu. Somehow she managed to live 2 lives. She used to have a different name and was a great gamer and streamer. Although she didn't show her face, her voice made her popular, and overall she earned well and lived well. One day, after finishing a stream, she had a heart attack and died. When Shushu thinks about it, she doesn't fully understand how it all happened. And when she opened her eyes again, she found herself in another world, in a country called the Zenta Empire. In her second life, she became the second princess. Her mother died in the war long ago. Her father was often sick, but he took care of her as best he could. Shushu had a very sweet and beautiful sister, Latia. At first, she was happy to start all over again. Her sister, beautiful and kind, loved her very much. But Latia died suddenly of illness when she was only 3 years old. Soon after, a rebellion began, and even her weak, sickly father died. The throne was seized by Shushu's uncle, Berg Willow. He was a terrible man, once locked her in a cold room. He also assigned her a mentor, who constantly beat her. If it weren't for Ninny, who looked after her, the girl would have quickly given up and died. And then when Shushu was 16, Uncle Berg Willow died after a long illness, and she had to become an empress subject to a bunch of weaklings. She lived and died like a doll controlled by other people's hands, just like her father, who died at the hands of the rebels. And then when Shushu opened her eyes again, she found herself in some strange place. When they reached the desired point, the girl noticed that there were already 4 more children there. She was genuinely surprised and did not understand why there were so many of them. All the children looked about the same age, but their features were slightly different. There was a woman sitting in front of them who noticed that everyone was finally there. She said that they were candidates for regression. The woman also explained that everything would be fair and that she would give each of them special gifts, starting with the simplest. The most innocent child will get the best family, the next one worse. The third will suffer the most terrible fate, and the last one will not return at all. Hearing this, Shushu burst into tears, and the woman asked why she was crying. Shushu said through tears that she did not want to live in another family again because it was very difficult. In her second life, she had to suffer because she was born into a terrible family, and then she was sentenced to death. After her words, all the other children began to cry. They said they didn't want to come back, and then the woman thought about it. She said that in her opinion, everything could be resolved quite simply. If no one wants to be born into a bad family, then they can stay here, and only one will return. The woman pointed her finger at Shusha. She offered the girl to sacrifice herself for the sake of the others. Recently, an old man said that the black star is her previous life. Only Shushu had stars here. Everyone else died for the first time, but she had already lived several lives, which meant she could live another one. The words about sacrifice worried Shusha a little, but she agreed. The woman approved of her choice and said it was wonderful to be prepared to sacrifice. She added that she would give the girl another gift. Then bags appeared in front of Shushu, and she became slightly confused. The woman explained that Shushu had to choose 2 of the 3 bags. The girl caught a familiar smell and thought that one of them contained her favorite sugar cookies, so she chose this one. It turned out to be huge, and then she chose another one, a pink bag, because she thought it was very beautiful. When Shushu opened it, a crown appeared on her head. This was the first bag. It gave her a good family. The girl was very surprised, and she will be allowed to open the second gift later. But now the moment has come for her, and Shusha was sent to a new family. The girl was very happy. The maid was sure that she was smiling even when she was just next to her. The woman noted that of all the children, this child was truly a treasure. She seemed like she was from another world. The goddess wanted to meet a child who would be reborn well. It seemed to her that this girl could become her successor. Shushu was already falling asleep and did not hear the words of the goddess. After some time, she opened her eyes. A maid was sitting next to her and asking why the girl had vomited. Shushu felt sick. Everything seemed confusing, but the goddess assured her that she would have a good family. But it turned out that she had been deceived. She began to cry, not understanding why. Upon awakening, she saw the imperial family and her second life. The realization of the deception brought bitter tears to her eyes. The maid didn't know what to do or how to help. The girl received a notice. She needed to read the terms and conditions, but she understood that she could not live this life again. She simply could not believe that she was again in the very place where she had been an empress and a puppet. There are too many bad people here. Shushu didn't see anything good in this family, and that's why she cried. The maid, meanwhile, asked what it meant to be a princess. Deciding to console Shusha a little, she played with her. In her past life, she had a completely different face, and it surprised her. Gradually, she began to realize that she had now become her sister. She had pink hair and bright green eyes like fresh leaves. At first, she didn't understand, but her eyes and her sister's were different colors. She was the sweetest and cutest child in the whole world. Now she has been reborn and has become her sister. The goddess spoke to her about returning, and Shushu again found herself in the imperial palace. This meant that she would not become a puppet like before. They named her Princess Shurfu, and the girl was surprised because she had the same name. In her second life, she was the timid younger sister with the same personality as before. No one knew that she streamed in the past. In reality, she was a quiet person. Nini was her nanny, looking after the princess. The nanny noticed that the lady was looking into all the mirrors with curiosity. The girl became slightly embarrassed by this and showed that she wanted to say something. Her lips weren't moving the way she wanted them to, and she didn't understand what was happening. Unexpectedly, she managed to call the nanny by name, Tuchka. She tried to say that she needed her sister, but her voice came out uncertainly. The maid thought for a moment and said that she had no sister, although there used to be a princess named Latia. Shushu was surprised because it was her sister. The maid added that Latia died of Cirito disease 2 years ago. The disease took her, and her name was exactly the same. But why she looked exactly like Latia remained unclear. Then the maid realized that she had let it slip in front of the princess. The goddess probably said that Shushu's soul came from another world. And perhaps this is true, meaning that the body can only survive if her soul is in it. But if she is not there, the body dies forever. This time, Latia became her younger sister, and she died again. So Shushu cried. The maid tried to convince the princess that there was no point in crying about such a thing. She picked up the girl in her arms and offered her some candy. Shushu decided that it was cotton candy and was delighted. All she had to do was start crying, and they immediately gave her something sweet. She smiled and began to eat. She was very pleased that they were taking care of her. It was delicious, very sweet, but suddenly she got scared. After all, she had just been sad. And then she understood. It seems that her mind really did remain childish, since she suddenly became so cheerful. The maid did not understand at all how one could be so sweet. Princess Shushu is a real treasure. The main character still can't believe it. The nanny always made her laugh, but the others didn't. Everyone loved only Latia. Even if she is a little weird in this life, she thinks that people won't hate her anyway. She has to be brave. Maybe things have changed, but if your sister has always been like this, then there's no need to try to be like her. Suddenly, the maid called the others, and they did not understand what had happened. The nanny told them to look at the girl. When they got closer, they realized that she just wanted to be looked at, straight into the heart. Shushu winked, and everyone immediately became delighted. Perhaps she should wink some more, but whether she can live like her sister is still unclear. This time they had a very cute baby girl, so adorable it was mind-blowing. Even the nanny adored her. At that moment, Shushu noticed a strange light near the window, similar to a flash. This was a message from the system that user Shushu had fulfilled the conditions. She told her to look at the light, but the maid was surprised and replied that she saw nothing. Then Shushu understood. The light was the same color as the one in the bag from the goddess. The system reported that the chat of the interdimensional streamer Shushu is open. The girl was very happy. The system notified that she now had one common channel, and the staff entered the chat. There are 3 participants in the general chat now. All 3 are maids. Shushu did not understand what all this meant, but she was very interested. It was exactly the same chat as during her streams in her first life. She was praised, and the system reported that for this, she would receive plus 30 interest points. There are 3 people in the chat, and in the room, everything is like in her first life, only probably without money. She asked that Shusha not be given any more sweets, but the maid explained that this was not possible because dinner was coming soon. However, Shushu did not agree with this and stated that she wanted more. The girl approached the maid, grabbed her by the hem, and asked very sweetly. From her words and look, the maid immediately understood that she could not refuse her. Then she promised to give only 1 piece, and Shushu beamed with joy. The system reported that the goddess was impressed with how quickly the girl was adapting. Her streaming skills would improve, and she could open a concept in the system. She has a good rating, and the streamer should stick to her ideological concept. This is her 3rd life, and the goddess has blessed her. Thanks to this, her abilities as an innocent child have been strengthened. Now she must make as many people as possible fall in love with her. Then she finally realized what it meant. She would have to behave more and more like a child. Suddenly, another maid ran into the room and said that an emergency had arisen. A guest came to visit them, but Shushu could not understand who it could be. The maid remarked that if this was the princess's guest, then it was strange because no one knew who he was. Very quickly, the guest himself and his servants entered the room. Shushu did not understand at all why this man came to them. Berg Willow stood in front of her. He had a nice face, cold gaze, flaming red hair, and broad shoulders. He said he didn't understand why he needed to be there at all. Shushu was frightened and could not understand why the greatest military leader of the empire and ruler of the northern lands of Ashusa came here. Her mother is not her mother yet. It is her half-sister, Scarlet Willow. For Shushu, he is an uncle. Even if he didn't die in his second life, he caught the poisonous dragon, Kitana. If it weren't for this, then so many strange monsters wouldn't have appeared in the lands of Willow, which were ruled by Uncle. Only dukes who have inherited the blood of the dragon can rule these lands. The duke who killed one of the strongest dragons was unable to return alive due to serious wounds. In their past life, they hardly communicated, but the girl still felt sorry for her relative's death. All this began to tire Berg out greatly. Then he said that the princess hears everything, and the master must understand this. But the gentleman replied that he didn't care what happened. His servant also added that His Majesty had ordered the princess to be taken to the temple on the way to suppression. But Berg still didn't understand why he was given this task. The girl heard about the suppression and realized that it must have been about subduing the fire dragon Kitana. At that time, the Duke tried to defeat the dragon and received serious injuries, which caused him to suffer for a long time. This injury became the cause of death in the next generation of the dragon. If her memory served her right, that was also the Emperor's plan. It was hard to believe that he didn't know about the Duke's plans to subdue the dragon. But suddenly she had a strong desire for cotton candy. Then she pulled herself together, realizing that now was not the time to think about it. Several messages appeared on the screen in front of her. The imperial family must receive a blessing at the temple every year. She was sure that the imperial line descended from the golden beast. Will not receive a blessing if at least one family member does not visit the temple. Otherwise, the whole family would be cursed and unhappy. This time she was supposed to go, but her uncle decided not to take her. The man did not understand why this was so. Now the emperor is looking for cracks in the northern lands, which greatly spoils the relationship with their family. Because the princess is his niece. The girl understood that if this had been the uncle, she knew such words would not have been able to convince him. Then, in her second life, he was the man who never came to her aid. She even wrote him a letter, asking, but he just ignored it. He was a terrible person. The maid turned to him and said that she would like to pass on something. She started talking, and the girl was worried that she would get hurt because of it. If the maid had suffered, the girl would have been ready to scratch out her uncle's eyes. However, he was not angry despite the maid's intervention. And in this, he differed from the emperor, who could mix everything up just to subjugate a person. The maid said that since the master was a guest of their princess, so since he has come, she invites him to have dinner with the princess. The man was surprised and said that there was no time for that. His servants noticed that he hadn't even had dinner yet. Then one of the servants approached the master and said that if he returned now, the emperor would send him here again. It's better to just spend a little time with them and then leave quietly. Hearing this, the gentleman became thoughtful. The girl thought that he seemed to have a bad relationship with the emperor. So now she will dine with her uncle. The whole kingdom was divided into three main powers. The first is the imperial family. The second is the duke who symbolizes each season. The third is the wizard's tower. Among them is Duke Willow, ruler of the North Winter and wild animals. He was a military leader and aristocrat who allied himself with the imperial family. All types of precious ores, from coal mines, magic metals, and many items obtained from the skins of animals. They were considered the values of a strong and independent party with which trade was conducted. But relations with the imperial family were very bad. The current rulers killed the previous emperor and seized the throne. Her mother was the head of the family, and frankly could have become an excellent warrior. But she married Shushu's father and handed over control to her half-brother, her maternal uncle. Mom died in the war, where this uncle sent her, so there could not be a good relationship with Willow's family. Power over this land was passed down by the will of the emperor from generation to generation. If it were not for the support of the son, a new war could have started. Nini helped the princess eat. She was always happy when Shushu tried to eat on her own. The servants of the Duke of Berg, her uncle, were simply delighted, but Berg himself treated her coldly. He only looked at her with contempt. Shushu didn't understand what that look meant until the system reported that the attribute concept had been activated. When her uncle saw her smile, he did not understand at all why she was behaving like that. This was her only living relative. Although he never visited her in his second life and ignored her, Shushu cheerfully told him to watch her eat something delicious. After all, the maid almost never gave her candy. It seems she did not inherit their imperial blood. All the emperor's children were born with blonde hair. It was always like that. Neither Shushu nor Latia were blondes, but their older sister was a beauty. She was loved, but Shushu was not. At some point, Shushu thought that it would be nice if at least one person could love her. She had a nanny who truly loved her. She approached her uncle and asked if he loved her. Then Berg said he didn't even know what to answer to that. He didn't love her, but he didn't hate her either. He just didn't feel anything for her. Still, it was better than how he treated her in his second life. Shushu came closer to her uncle and asked him to hug her. But he didn't understand why he should do this. And then she asked again if he loved her. Then he asked why he had to repeat it again. The girl looked at him with sweet eyes and asked again if he loved her. He thought she was as stubborn and reckless as her sister. After this, one of the servants took Shusha in his arms and smiled. The system reported that a new person had been added to the chat. The same servant who had enjoyed holding the girl. She got 25 points of interest from him. Grant is the knight who was holding her in his arms. Now, only Uncle was not in this chat. She was the only one who wasn't interested in her, and that made her especially sad. Shushu started crying and calling her nanny. The uncle did not understand at all why the servant was handing the girl over to him, and he said that the princess stopped crying in his arms. Shushu said that she wanted to please, and although she was ashamed, that was her plan. If the children do not decide to take her to the temple, then according to the rules, she will have to go there with the knights, no matter how afraid she is of their heavy armor and severity. In her second life, she avoided it at all costs, because she knew how dangerous and unpleasant knights could be. It was better to go there alone than with them. The gentleman reminded that Willow's identity had never been officially introduced, which meant there was no reason for him to take her there. She had to prevent that. She had no right to interfere. She could help only once, when in another life the Duke was mortally wounded and she fought with a dragon. It is sad to remember how he died. The country was already starting to rot from the inside. It needed someone like him. He was about to leave, but the girl remembered the nanny's words. "There is a lot of delicious cotton candy outside." Then the uncle turned around sharply and asked suspiciously what she had just said, as if he couldn't believe his ears. She repeated with complete confidence that she wanted to see Kitana, as if it were the most ordinary desire. But he had things to do, he had to go, and so he only looked at her, not daring to answer right away. Uncle still stopped surprised and asked again if he had heard correctly. Had he really misheard? The girl smiled cheerfully, finished her candy, and he asked again what Titan she was talking about, as if he hoped that it was just a childish fantasy. No one knew about the dragon's subjugation, yet the news did not reach the ears of either the nobility or the common people. Everything remained a secret, hidden in the shadow of events and unknown forces. Even the emperor himself did not know yet. If this is so, then there is only one step left: to understand who now owns this power and how it will be used at the right moment. Then the uncle looked at the girl closely. He began to wonder if she had inherited the ancient blood of the Willow family, the one long thought lost. He asked her a strange question, wondering if she was a real prophet. Only then did he agree to enter a closed chat room where secret matters were discussed. Shushu was confused. She found it hard to believe that her uncle had actually decided to join. She didn't understand what prophecy he had tied all of this to. She had never encountered anything like this in her past life. No one had ever spoken to her about prophecies, and she had certainly never heard anyone call her a prophet. She wondered if he was referring to someone high up in the imperial palace. Perhaps it was some dignitary she hadn't heard of yet. But Berg immediately rejected this idea. He said that it was impossible, because we are talking about a fire dragon named a Taita, a creature that cannot be subdued. His servant asked in horror if he had just said it, and then quietly added a question. Who dared to subjugate a Taita, and does anyone know about it? He noted to himself that no one but them should know about this incident. The secret should remain between them, because any unnecessary word could cause unnecessary noise. The man carefully picked up the girl and, holding her closer, looked intently into her eyes, as if trying to read in them at least the slightest explanation of what was happening. Shushu shrank in fear, not understanding why the master was doing this. Her heart began to beat faster because all this was unexpected and very frightening. Fear took over her completely, and tears rolled down her cheeks. She could not contain her emotions because she did not know what to expect next. Sobbing, she began to call for her nanny, Nini, and burst into loud cries, looking for at least some protection in this frightening situation for her. Nini rushed to the girl, not understanding what had happened, and Berg was puzzled by how light she was. He had never expected his niece to be so fragile. He thought that the princess was very tiny, and remembered how his youngest son was much heavier. Then the servant added that he first held his son in his arms, only at the age of 8. Turning her head, the girl suddenly noticed that she had dropped her favorite candy, and this only intensified her tears and grief from everything that had happened. The girl couldn't hold back her tears, and they flowed even more. All the food she was holding in her hands fell to the floor, and she only cried bitterly, feeling helpless. He carefully picked her up from the floor, stroking her head, and said in a calm tone that she shouldn't play with her food like that. His words were soft, but there was concern in them. He handed her a candy, hoping that it would at least cheer her up a little. He knew that small joys could lift her spirits and help her forget about her tears a little. Soon the girl met her uncle again. She felt that he would be there and that he would be able to support her in any difficult situations. She waited for his questions, knowing that he was worried. He asked politely, but with slight surprise, how the girl knew the name of the Atayit. His gaze was attentive, and he tried to understand what was behind her words and what she might know. In the past, during one of the operations to subdue the fire dragon, the name of Ataita was associated with many countries. This was hidden from most, and perhaps many did not know the whole truth. The girl, after thinking for a while, said that she had also heard about the successful completion of the operation. The emperor had used a very strict scheme, and this, in her opinion, played a key role in the success. She confidently added that she had heard that her uncle had already caught the dragon. It was her personal opinion, but she believed that her uncle would definitely cope with any task, no matter how difficult it was. Uncle did not understand who exactly Shushu was talking to. He was very puzzled by this, and he tried to understand what they were talking about. He could not imagine who could be her interlocutor at that moment. Shushu told him everything that had happened before, and now she was sure that her uncle would take her to the temple himself. Her words were full of confidence, and at that moment, she felt that help was near. However, soon the uncle unfortunately received wounds in battle, which turned out to be fatal. All this happened due to some actions on the part of the emperor, which hastened his death. The gentleman, noticing his condition, turned to one of his servants and seemed to be thinking. He expressed interest in the frequency of communication between the princess and the emperor, asking about their relationship. The servant, who was near, replied that Mr. Rubes had said that such meetings did not take place more than once a month. This, in his opinion, was true, although it seemed little. Then the servant, after thinking for a moment, asked his master whether he really believed that the emperor was aware of all the events taking place between them. The question was important and had a hidden meaning. The gentleman answered slowly that the emperor most likely already knew what was happening, but he was also sure that all of this remained a top secret. The information leaked due to outside interference. Berg expressed interest in the exact reason why the imperial family began to discuss Ataitu, and was also surprised that the princess was aware of it. Obviously, someone had deliberately decided to discuss this topic right in front of her, leaving traces of the conversations. It couldn't have been an accident. Berg was extremely curious to know who among his close ones could become a traitor and reveal such information. He could not understand who could do it. Berg firmly promised that whoever was involved in this would not be able to live a long life, and his fate would be sad. The servant assured that he would contact the command at the first moment when such an opportunity presented itself. He was ready to act immediately. The 3-year-old princess clearly remembered the emperor's entire conversation without missing a single detail. She carefully followed every word. The emperor said that his servant must make all the preparations, as he had to go to the temple with the princess to carry out an important task. He asked the girl's maid and nanny to take charge of organizing and carrying the princess's luggage, as everything was ready for departure and all the details needed to be settled. He also specified that a maid would accompany them on the trip to help and provide comfort, as the journey promised to be long and difficult for the princess. The girl, Shushu, was very unhappy with this decision. She could not understand why her uncle was doing this, because she could not believe that they had to travel together with a nanny. Then the uncle offered her a lot of sweets, hoping that this would calm her down. Shushu, although surprised, agreed, because she liked sweets, and the uncle could persuade her to do a lot. Shushu didn't understand where he got so many sweets from, and what he wanted to achieve with them. She doubted that such small gifts could change her mind or decision about the trip. But despite her doubts, the uncle apparently believed that this approach with candy would help him persuade the girl, and perhaps he was right in his confidence. Uncle said that now on the princess's way to the temple, Willow will protect her so that she can feel safe and not worry about possible dangers during the journey. The system displayed the number of people in the chat, which made it possible to monitor the situation and understand who was online and who was not, which was important for the organization. In the chat, Berg noted that the princess was too light for such a journey, and her condition required special attention, including taking care of her writing and other needs during the journey. She couldn't understand what kind of strange person was next to her. It seemed that his behavior was very different from the people she was used to, which immediately attracted her attention. After 5 days of preparation, everyone was ready, armed, and set out. The journey promised to be long, but everyone involved understood that it was necessary. During these 5 days, the girl never saw her uncle. He was very busy, and her days passed in anticipation of the meeting, but time still dragged on slowly. Despite the lack of communication with her uncle, she did not feel lonely. In addition, there was always care and attention nearby, and every day brought something interesting. There were always treats for her, and everyone tried to make her days as comfortable as possible. The attention of the adults did not leave her without care, and she liked it. However, the girl kept saying that she only wanted candy. Considering it the most important and necessary thing for herself, this became her little wish in everyday life. Everyone around agreed that she was becoming more beautiful with each passing day. Strangely, no one could pass by without noticing her extraordinary charm. She wondered if there was any way to make her uncle take more interest in her. His indifference surprised her because even his subordinates could not help but notice her beauty. All the compliments she received invariably increased her self-esteem. Every day, her self-confidence grew stronger thanks to the attention of others. She thought about it, noticing that this cat was completely different from the one she had once streamed. She tried to figure out how exactly it was different from the other animals she had had before. There were no sponsors. This became a big problem for her. Without them, it was difficult to continue her usual activities, especially when all activities depended on financial support. More importantly, she was able to begin to read thoughts through this cat. The feeling of entering another creature's world was amazing and a little scary at the same time. Despite all the difficulties, she still hadn't fully figured out her new abilities, but it was incredibly pleasant to realize that this creature really loved and trusted her. After this, the man turned to the princess and asked everyone to disperse. There was confidence and determination in his voice. He knew exactly how to act at this moment. She left the castle, but now perhaps everything became much clearer. Having understood the importance of what had happened, she realized that even more difficult tests and decisions awaited them ahead. The man felt useless, like a piece of shit who didn't deserve to return without the princess. He knew his mission was not accomplished, and now he was determined to make things right. He had been ordered to deliver the princess urgently, and he knew that it could not be delayed. But this conversation was not with her uncle. He knew that he had to act quickly and without unnecessary questions. The emperor had clearly told him that he was not allowed to return without the princess. It was an order he could not ignore, and he knew that the consequences would be severe if he disobeyed. So he hurried on his way without losing a minute. The girl could not understand who this man was and what was really going on, but the feeling of anxiety did not leave her. This young man was a sorcerer, and he made a cake, saying that the princess should eat deliciously, and with pleasure, he greeted her and brought her the cake. He explained that it was the most delicious cake, namely strawberry pie, which is a specialty of the nearby city of Denbo. He said that it was a real local delicacy. The services that accompanied the princess were surprised, as this city was quite far away, and it was difficult to get there. The journey took about a day. The impressions were strong. They all thought that using magic for such purposes was something incredible, but at the same time, magic always fascinated. Could there be anything better for such a unique case? When the girl asked this sorcerer to hug her, she did not expect that this moment would be so special. The wish was sincere, and her face was shining with joy. However, the sorcerer was actually a woman. The girl was delighted, enjoying the cake and wondering at the same time how it all happened. It was a special moment. The girl, having heard about Even and her mysophobia, was now finally convinced that mysophobia is an obsessive fear of contamination and infection. She realized that such a fear really exists. It seems that this window of the thought system appears at the moment when a person stares at it, not realizing that his attention has already been attracted by something unusual. The sorceress believed that the princess truly liked the food and would appreciate it because it was so important for her to please those she respected and loved. The girl, with a bright smile, happily said that she really liked what she tried. It was a sincere confession, full of satisfaction and gratitude. She added that Evina was a wonderful woman, but the sorceress, observing her life among such people, noted that it was not always easy to be in their company. Somehow, by chance, the strawberry fell out of the girl's hands, but the uncle, arriving in time, caught it, saving it from being lost. This was the moment when everything could have ended not so well. The girl was very happy that he managed to catch her, because there was so much warmth in that moment. And most importantly, she did not lose the tasty berry. She felt safe. The uncle, a little tired, said that after 5 days they were very tired. But despite this, she managed to convince his subjects to help them. It was quite an achievement. The sorceress, watching what was happening, noted how nice this gentleman looked next to the princess, how their interaction, despite all the difficulties, was harmonious and warm. Well, he just picked her up and walked on. There was nothing special about his actions, but everyone saw how much he cared for her. It was obvious to everyone, but he couldn't understand why all the servants were looking at him so attentively and intently. His gaze was uncomprehending because it seemed to him that nothing unusual was happening. After some time, he finally decided to ask what was going on and why such an unusual atmosphere surrounded him. He could no longer stand this silence and mysterious looks. They said they were taking a short break, and everyone needed some rest to recuperate before the next action. The time off was needed and long awaited. He glanced at the princess and, smiling softly, took her cake in his hands, realizing that she had been waiting for this moment. Everything that was happening reminded him of something important. He informed her that unfortunately she would have to eat a little in a place that was not quite suitable for it, but there was no choice. She had to accept the situation as it was. The girl did not object and calmly ate everything that was offered to her. She was not used to whims, and this did not cause her any inconvenience, even if the conditions were not ideal. Berg wanted to say something else, perhaps make a remark, but the girl, as if sensing this, asked him to hug her. There was a sincere request in her eyes. But the gentleman, despite her request, said that he would simply sit next to her. The girl immediately objected, insisting that he hug her anyway. Her desire was irrevocable. The servants could not understand how one could remain so reserved and indifferent in such a situation. They whispered quietly among themselves, calling the master cold-blooded, unable to hide their surprise. The girl, thinking about this, also came to the conclusion that she really did feel good now. She felt that despite all these difficulties, this was a moment of peace and comfort. The Duke, realizing the importance of the next stage, provided a new carriage and carefully prepared delicious food for everyone, so that the journey could continue in more comfortable conditions. The wizards also provided assistance to anyone who suffered from motion sickness, using their skills to make the journey less difficult and provide at least a minimum of peace and comfort. In another life, she was almost never given food, especially when she went with the knights on long and difficult routes, and this situation always remained in her memory as a difficult test. The nanny was always her protector. She tried to solve any problems that might arise. The girl felt safe, knowing that there was someone reliable nearby. The Duke was a man, unlike the imperial family, who could be talked to. He was closer to the people, unlike the arrogant authorities, who were always cold. In the future, she hoped that everything would remain the same. However, her uncle was not in the chat, which made her think. He entered abruptly and immediately left without giving an explanation for his actions. She began to think that maybe his interest in her had waned. Maybe she had done something wrong. Anxiety crept into her soul, but she still hoped that it was just her harassment. But soon he gave her a candy, and the girl was very happy. She did not even expect such a turn of events, but sweets always lifted the mood and brought joy. Berg noticed that he had given her something sweet and grinned. He knew how it affected the girl because her joy was immediately visible. It was a simple but warm expression of concern. Now he had to count how much food she had eaten. It was an unexpected question, and the girl did not understand why he suddenly became interested in the expenses associated with her sweet treat. However, the candy was so delicious that it was probably worth listening to him, at least once. Although the girl was not used to such questions, she still decided to give in to curiosity. The gentleman asked if she was interested in the book the emperor had given her. It was an unexpected question, but the girl had already gotten used to his manner of communication and decided to think a little before answering. The servant noticed her interest and promised to show her the book that was now in her possession. Using magic, he demonstrated it, which only added to the mystery of the moment. The girl thought about it, figuring out that this book was indeed a personalized one. She couldn't help but be surprised how it ended up in her hands, because she knew that such books were rare and important. The Book of Names is not just a book, but a whole biographical dictionary in which the imperial family recorded the names of people who were outstanding in their field. This book not only listed their names, but also details of their talents. It is a kind of chronicle of great people who played a key role in the development of the kingdom. These talents that helped the imperial family had a special significance. They themselves would have been unthinkable without the help of the solar protection that came with each generation, making them even stronger. And those who are able to see this talent are a significant part of the historical destiny of this family. It is not just a gift, but an important ability that opens up opportunities for emperors. This story begins with the birth of the first emperor. Born under the light of the beast, he was already destined from the very beginning for the great future that awaited him. His birth was significant because he was blessed by Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. She gave him not only talents, but also made the child's hair golden as a sign of his chosenness. From that moment on, the likelihood that the children of emperors would be born with outstanding talents and become blondes increased. It became a kind of tradition passed down from generation to generation. The girl was unusually talented, despite her plain appearance. She was not a blonde, but her abilities were immediately noticeable. Her eyes, like her father's, spoke for themselves. Her signs of talent were so obvious that even strangers immediately noticed something special in her gaze. The emperor was destined for the great responsibility of filling this book, an obligation he had taken upon himself at the behest of God himself. It was his divine destiny. The girl's uncle, although not without certain talents, could not boast of outstanding abilities. His opportunities were limited, which put him in a difficult position. Uncle, although he remembered a lot, still could not forget about this book. He asked her again and again if she had seen its pages, trying in vain to find a solution. And then the girl suddenly said that she had actually seen the book. This confession left her uncle completely confused. He could not believe his ears. She remembered everything that was written in the book, even the smallest details. Her memory was so clear that she could accurately reproduce everything down to the last word. However many talented people whose names were listed in this book met their death, their lives ended tragically, and their fates became part of this terrible story. The girl remembered absolutely everything, every word in this book, every note made in it. This knowledge was a heavy burden for her, which she carried with her. Her thoughts were filled with anxiety. She could not understand what to do with this information. She felt confused and did not know how to proceed. Soon, her uncle decided to take her to the estate. He understood that she should be safe, and only there, under protection, could she find answers to her questions. If she did decide to answer, she would have the opportunity to enjoy the candies she loved so much. This moment seemed important to her, and she was in no hurry. He asked her again if it was true that she had actually seen it, trying to gauge how sure she was of her words. His eyes were full of expectation. The girl easily confirmed his words, but deep down she already understood that it was worth deciding everything right now. She was not going to drag out time when everything was so obvious. She decided that she would force him to make a decision by saying that she had seen not just anything, but something much more mysterious, like the color of the book being darker. This thought did not give her peace. It was like a huge period that put a final point in their conversation. The girl hoped that this would be enough. He asked her again if she had read the book, and she confirmed that she had. She was ready to give him all the answers he wanted to hear, even if it was not entirely convenient. At this time from behind, he quietly added that many cakes had already been prepared for her to please her. His words sounded like a promise of something pleasant and delicious. He said that if she told him everything she knew, the cakes would be hers. It was tempting, but the girl was focused on the important part of the conversation. He didn't have high hopes for her answers, but he still needed at least the smallest information. Every word was important to understand what to do next. The secret of conquering the Ataita was already beginning to leak out, and he knew he had to act quickly. Time was against him, and every move he made was worth its weight in gold. He explained that he was going to show her pictures of people and asked the girl to tell him if she recognized anyone. It was his way of helping her remember people she knew. The girl thought that if she told him, then perhaps he would fulfill her request and take her somewhere. This was her condition for continuing the conversation. She had long dreamed of living among people who loved and appreciated her. In her heart was the desire to find a place where she would be welcomed with joy. She promised that she would tell him if she remembered anyone. For this, she received praise from him, which made her feel confident and satisfied. He offered her that if she answered him, she would get a piece of cake for each answer. The girl agreed, because the offer seemed tempting to her. He added that he wasn't sure he would have enough cakes, but if she answered more than 100 times, he would give her a special coupon as a bonus. She realized that for every coupon she received, she could exchange it for a cake. The more coupons she collected, the more cakes she would receive from him. The girl agreed because cakes were her weakness. She loved them with all her heart, and the prospect of trying something delicious immediately attracted her attention. The servant possessing magical powers began to show her images of many people. He used his powers to show her those she should recognize. Among those who appeared in the magical vision was a man she knew very well. He was one of her subordinates, and his face could not leave her indifferent. This man was connected to her past life. He was the one who hurt her, manipulated her thoughts and feelings, turning her life into a real torture. The princess, after thinking for a moment, said that she recognized him. However, she was tormented by doubts. What if no one believed her? If her words were empty and no one supported her? The girl, feeling confidence creep into her voice, added that she had seen him before when no one believed him. At that time, she always told the truth, but no one listened to her. She knew that if this man thought she was lying, the consequences could be dire. The truth was on her side, and she couldn't just ignore it. He thought for a moment, but still agreed. He said that he was ready to continue, that he saw no reason for doubt, and that he was ready to help her in this matter. He savored the first cake for a long time, enjoying every bite. He could take his time, because at that moment, he didn't have to think about other worries. The girl was delighted, her face lit up with joy, and she began to eat with pleasure. Her little hands deftly grabbed the cakes that were in front of her. Meanwhile, the servant continued his work, preparing the people so that they could appear before the princess. He was busy and focused, understanding the importance of his mission. Over time, the girl had so many cakes that her uncle probably thought she could be useful in some way. He was thinking about how her further actions could help. It all seemed so strange and unusual that the girl felt uneasy. She could not understand what exactly was happening and what awaited her next in this unfamiliar world. Uncle said that if he brought her along with him, he did not understand what she would have to do there. There was some uncertainty in his words, and he did not know what to expect. But the servant noticed that Berg seemed to be saying he would take her, despite the uncertainty of the situation. It was a little odd, but he didn't dwell on it. The servant also noted that perhaps all of this was happening because the prediction they had received had been completely wrong. This added even more confusion to the situation. But in the end, there was nothing left but empty expectations. All attempts to change anything were useless, and the girl began to lose interest in what was happening around her. Then the gentleman said that he did not know whether it was worth continuing this conversation, but perhaps it would be better to end everything here. His words sounded like a certain point in this strange case. After a while, the maid carefully picked up the girl in her arms, gently telling her to pay attention to the other man. It wasn't that scary. She had to stay calm. The girl thought for a moment, but then clarified that if she answered, she would have to wait a little longer. She noted that there were already too many cakes, and it was unlikely that they would have time to eat them all. However, the girl still could not resist, and mentioned that her uncle, despite all his strictness, had such an evil look that the Duke quickly fell silent upon hearing her words. The man immediately apologized, explaining that it was a really important conversation. He acknowledged that his behavior might have seemed rude, but the situation required special attention. The uncle, watching the proceedings closely, added that if the girl told him anything else important, it would be very useful to him. He explained that this information was vital to him. The girl nodded understandingly, agreeing with his words. The servant, seeing her reaction, thanked the princess, and then a soft, sincere smile appeared on his face, as gratitude for her help. At that moment she was shown an older man, and asked if she knew him. She looked at his face, trying to remember if she had ever met this man before. The girl immediately felt that this man was extremely dangerous. There was a shadow of something dark in his presence, and she could not be mistaken in her feeling. Of all the people working on his side, he was the most feared, although he had an undeniable talent for intrigue and manipulation, able to work with the most insidious plans. This man was responsible for the death of many innocent souls. His hands were covered in the blood of those who did not have time to run away or hide from him. He spared no one. The girl, looking at him, declared that she knew him well. She could not forget his face, even though it was covered with a mask of cold ruthlessness. The servant, raising his eyebrows in bewilderment, asked whether she had ever actually met him in person, since his face was not known to everyone in the area. The girl confirmed her words, adding that despite his cruelty, he is really good when he does his job, but in his soul he remains a bad person. She advised him to be fired as quickly as possible, but her uncle, not wanting to discuss the subject any further, said that he had had enough of it and did not want to hear about it again. Although she was the child of his older sister, her uncle did not have high hopes for her, believing that she was still too young to truly understand complex adult issues. She had known the imperial family for a long time, and at that moment, when she said this, she did not even think about it. These words burst out by themselves, without any ulterior motive. The Duke, getting angry, exclaimed that he had simply asked who the traitor was, nothing more and nothing less. He had not expected such tension in the answer. The girl burst into tears and said bitterly that she didn't know who this man was. He was just very scary and evil. That's all she knew. Her uncle, not being the nicest person, either assured her that he would not frighten her. He had no intention of causing her pain or fear. The girl began to cry again, saying that she did not know. In response, the servant asked the master's forgiveness for his impudence, but noted that he had asked the first question. He still thought that it was enough for him to know the name, but strangely enough it was the princess who spoke first, mentioning something important about the conspiracy. Without this ability, it is impossible to understand who the traitor is, or whether he exists at all. It is the same force that affects everyone but hidden in a certain form. The gentleman said that he now understood everything, and the prophet confirmed his words. This is important because without this connection, the force becomes invulnerable to ordinary perception and struggle. This rare ability is passed down through Willow's blood, a part of her that only a few possess. It is unique and those who carry it often find themselves connected to great events. They are able to look into the future, predict events, but there is a special condition for this. This force must have a pair harmony with another force is necessary for it to act. The knight must be by the prophet's side, protecting him from all dangers. He plays a key role in maintaining balance and supporting the prophet when his power gets out of control. Prophets may exist today, but finding them is not an easy task. The power of prophecy is relevant and important, although it is extremely rare in modern reality. The last prophet was known about 200 years ago, and his power influenced many events of that time. His fate left an indelible mark on history. Knights, who are charged with protecting the prophets, are born with special powers. Their strength stands out from the rest, and they become key figures in any major conflict or events. However, if such knights cannot find the prophet, they will not be able to cope with the limitless power that will destroy them. They may lose their minds and lose control of themselves. If they fail to do this, their death will be inevitable, as they will not be able to bear such a burden, and all their power will turn against them, leading to their death. Berg was flooded with unpleasant memories of his sister. The thoughts kept coming back and he couldn't get rid of them. Memories of her smile, her laughter, her voice. The servant approached the master, taking a step forward. He said that there had been a moment of misunderstanding, which could have been insignificant, but in this situation, it turned out to be important. If the princess did indeed have prophetic powers, it meant that everything that was happening could have been part of her predictions, and this created doubts about his actions. The girl, seeing that the situation was not so simple, began to cry. She did not understand what was happening, and the gentleman calmly said that all this was not yet confirmed, and more time was needed. He also noted that there were still a few things he was unsure about, and he couldn't draw any conclusions until he got more information about what was going on. The girl was in complete shock, not knowing how to react to what was happening. The servant tried to intervene, warning the Duke that he should not be so strict and harsh with the girl. At this point, one of the other servants intervened and said that he understood how the master felt, but the princess was not responsible for what was happening and should not suffer because of it. The other servants also thought that the girl was in fact still too young. They couldn't imagine thinking any other way. This was her life, and it couldn't be any other way. However, after 5 days, they came to the unanimous conclusion that she really was a child. It was a fact that was impossible not to believe. Her age spoke for itself. The Duke became very angry at this. He could not understand how everyone could come to such conclusions. He said that they all seemed to have gone mad. They claimed that the girl cried too often, and did so with such bitterness that she could not be anything other than a child. The tears, in their opinion, were proof of her innocence. The system displayed a list of chat participants. There were 22 of them. They were all connected and watching what was happening. The atmosphere in the chat was tense and awaiting confirmation. All 22 people were sure that the princess was not to blame for what happened. Each of them believed that she could not be the cause of all these events, that something else influenced her. The system showed that she had already gained a lot of interest points. The girl was delighted that she was supported. This gave her confidence in her actions and decisions. She was sure that these points of interest were a direct sign that she was supported. It meant that her point of view was correct, and she was not alone in her experiences. This made her cry, and everyone found this moment very touching. Her tears were sincere, full of emotion. But it was not just like that. Everything around her was alien to her. In her past life, only her nanny, loyal and caring, always stood by her side, despite all the sorrows. For her, it was always natural, and she did not leave the girl in difficult moments. Now she cries, not just from fear or pain, but from the knowledge that there are people ready to support her. It gave her mixed feelings, but at the same time it was comforting. Apparently, everything that happened was the result of a misunderstanding. The discrepancy between what she expected and reality was the cause of all this worry and anxiety. Otherwise, if she had not found the truth, she would have used magic to clarify the situation and remove any doubts. It was her way of finding solutions to difficult issues. However, another mage intervened and stated that if magic was used so often, its power would begin to weaken. This would undermine the very essence of magic and make it useless in such cases. She responded to this, raising her voice, that she did not consider it a problem. If she had to lose consciousness to achieve her goal, then so be it, and he would carry her anyway. The girl, in turn, believed that all the events that were happening were unfair. Everything around her seemed not as it should be, and a feeling of deep disagreement reigned in her soul. Soon after, her face became swollen from crying for so long. She couldn't stop. She was so overwhelmed with emotion that her eyes hurt. The maid, seeing her condition, tried to console the girl, offering her cakes, hoping to at least slightly raise her mood and distract her from sad thoughts. When she tried to use magic, it caused even to faint, and the truth came out on its own. Even magic couldn't ease her condition at that moment. Unfortunately, this person turned out to be bad, and the girl could not understand how it happened that such a person was next to her. The relationship with him left much to be desired. Remembering her past life, the girl understood that he had never been kind to her, and that was why she felt hostility towards him, not expecting that anything could change. Everyone who was nearby continued to support the princess, confident that the Duke should ask for forgiveness for his actions and show at least minimal regret. After a while, she noticed her uncle approaching her and felt his footsteps getting closer. This caused her to feel strangely agitated and confused about what was happening. She couldn't figure out what was happening and didn't understand what exactly he was going to do. It was all unexpected and frightening to her. She was sure it was related to the wound the Duke had received while fighting the dragon, but his behavior seemed strange and unpredictable. She really wanted this day to be special, so she tried her best to help him to make everything go as well as possible. She was determined to have only a positive outcome. She had something important she wanted to say, so she said loudly that she was afraid of the Duke, hoping that this would make him understand her anxiety and serve as a warning. She was incredibly scared when she remembered what his face looked like at that moment. This memory invariably made her feel uneasy and anxious. The servant approached the Duke and pointed out that if he continued to look like that, the princess would become even more afraid of him. He tried to warn him, thinking that this could make the situation worse. His presence was so powerful that it seemed as if he was literally looming over her. It seemed threatening, but the Duke believed that he had done nothing to cause such fears. He just noted to himself that he should think about his actions towards the princess. He understood that his behavior affected her perception, and he wanted to change that. The uncle was very surprised because his children were not at all like her. This made him think about how different they all are and how each of them perceives the world around them. The girl was disappointed that the situation had turned out this way. This led to him deciding that he needed to be less strict and try to understand her feelings in order to support her. The Duke gave the girl a fig, which was surprisingly fresh and ripe. He thought that she would definitely appreciate such a gift because this fruit was very rare. The servant noted that this fig was the best of all that were available. The Duke even decided that this variety should be saved for the girl, as it was perfectly tasty. The gentleman gave orders to bring only the best and most popular treats from the city. He wanted all the treats that would appear before the girl to be of the highest quality. The treat did look delicious, and she thoughtfully wondered if it was some kind of special cake. However, her attention was completely taken by this sweet treat. The girl finally agreed to try it, asking for the treat to be passed to her. She was intrigued by what could actually be in this delicious treat. She thought it might be cake, but once she tasted it, she realized it wasn't quite what she expected. The taste was unusual and somehow familiar. It turned out to be a date. In her past life, the girl loved such sweets, and despite her current life, she still felt nostalgic for this taste. She couldn't help herself. The taste was so delicious that she couldn't stop eating it. It was something incredibly delicious. The uncle was quite surprised that the children liked such things so much. He thought that perhaps he should stock up on this treat and take it with him on his wagon to treat them again. The gentleman said that this would be a symbol of his apology to her. He admitted that he had done wrong and was ready to correct his mistakes by offering her such a gesture. The girl was very happy with this offer and happily asked him to promise that she would get a lot of this delicious food that she liked so much. The servant noticed how the girl, delighted by the conversation, bit her finger, doing it so cutely that even she herself was surprised by her reaction. The gentleman, in turn, noted that this was probably one of the easiest promises he had ever had to make in his entire life. After his words, the girl smiled and then asked her uncle to hug her. He was a little surprised by such a request, but still decided that he would not refuse her. He said that she was very funny and that she would probably continue to make him laugh. However, he promised to fulfill her request. All this was happening because of his kindness to her. He knew that she would be the one who could prevent his death if something went wrong. After he picked her up, her presence showed up in the system again. He returned to the chat, becoming one of the participants as before. Everything happened very quickly. In the chat, the girl saw Berg suggest renting a bakery in the next city, thinking it was a good idea. He was apparently determined. The girl immediately remembered his words. The girl couldn't believe that he was keeping his promises. She had hoped for so long that they would make peace, and now he had succeeded in achieving it. She felt warm inside. She decided to take a closer look at him because he often fed her, showing his care. Now his behavior seemed quite kind and sincere. She could trust him. It took them 15 days to get to the temple. At that point, they had already walked 8 days, and there were still many more days ahead. Everything was going according to plan, despite the difficulties. And she was not bored, despite the long days of travel. He took care of her, and she was surrounded by an atmosphere of calm that allowed her not to worry about difficulties. One of her companions would constantly bring her new toys that would miraculously appear in their camp. There were so many of them that she would even get lost in their diversity. They often quarrel with each other because everyone tries to find something better for themselves, even if it is a toy, which creates constant competition between them. After this, the sorceress approached the girl and asked her in a soft tone to move away from her without explaining the reason for her request, but her gaze was full of hidden meaning. It became unclear why he was making such dangerous objects for the princess, although she, on the contrary, was tied to this tree, which it would seem did not pose a threat. They asked the sorceress to stop her aggressive actions, as her behavior resembled that of an evil cat ready to jump on anyone who dared to disturb her. The princess spent a lot of time with these people, and over time she learned their names, remembering each one, even if some of them were not so close to her. Everyone surrounded her with care and attention, so each of them tried to please her, and each gave her many gifts, which she sincerely appreciated. One of the servants said that he had prepared a rattle for her, but his face was clouded with disappointment, as if the gift had not lived up to his expectations and efforts. However, the girl said that she liked the rattle very much, and this touched the servant so much that his heart was filled with gratitude and joy from her words. In her second life, the girl never even saw rattles or other toys. Her childhood was deprived of these joys, but she never complained, knowing that this was her fate. If there were rattles in the house, they always went to the older sister. The girl could only dream that someday she would be lucky enough to hold them, at least once. The girl decided that she would give him her smile. With a slight movement, she winked at him, as if in response to his glance, and even said a few words. All attention was on her face. He was sure that the girl was a real miracle. He said that she was an angel, his princess, and he was delighted by her sweet appearance and the carefree naivety that shone in her eyes. He thought about the future and decided that he would definitely get married, and for that, he would need a child who would look like a cute rabbit, like this girl. His dreams were simple. He continued to drink the tree, which looked quite strange. Many people were puzzled by this, but he did not pay attention to it, continuing to do what seemed right to him. Despite the many people around her, All these services continued to bring the girl many different things, but at some point, a sorceress approached her and asked everyone to be silent. The girl had magic, and she was not alone. There were 15 people in her chat now, each of whom somehow influenced her life, leaving their mark on her path. Even if the princess suddenly turns into a mosquito, he will still be ready to suffer and give his blood for her, because for him, there is no barrier in the desire to help her. The girl doesn't particularly want to imagine such strange and unpleasant situations, because they only cause her confusion and bewilderment. But deep down, she still thinks about it. She had read in books that some people were so attached to their princesses that they refused to go to duty if they knew she would not be there. If their first relationship had not ended so quickly, perhaps they would have had such wonderful children as those who represent princesses full of love and tenderness. If only the princess could visit their house, his younger brother would be incredibly happy, because he has long dreamed of seeing her in his house and spending time with her. Ivina once told in the chat that today she had to fight the male wizard and jokingly said that she wanted to send her heart to the princess herself. However, they didn't have a box big enough for such an important message, and she can't understand how this happened because she was absolutely sure that she had prepared everything. The girl had heard that the princess was famous for her kindness, but in reality it was not so. Everything was completely different, and her behavior left everyone perplexed. The princess easily won the attention of those around her. The hearts she generously gave away again attracted the attention of the servants, and now she received more and more interest and attention. Ivina was the most active of all. Sometimes she was even a little scared because her actions were always accompanied by some kind of unpredictability and energy. It was time for training. Everyone was waiting for this moment when they could concentrate and get down to business, because there was less and less time to prepare. The knights were already leaving, finishing their daily tasks, and they returned again to continue training with the princess. They all focused on their tasks without distractions. Every day they would disappear to train or attend meetings. This became their normal routine, and everyone was busy with important matters with no time to rest. The squad was going to conquer the dragon, a Taitu, and so they did not miss a single training session. Every session was important to achieve their goal, and no one could afford to relax. It was a moment when the girl could finally spend time in the company of her nanny. Both felt calm at that moment, especially without extra people around when they could be alone. It all felt more like a discussion where everyone was expressing their opinions than a real chat. She was still trying to figure out what was going on, but it was hard to understand what was going on. Maybe she was wrong. She doubted that she could actually have such a conversation. It all seemed strange, but she was curious if she could somehow interact with them. The girl, like many others, had a desire to do something useful, to share something important. She would gladly give them something valuable, but she did not know how and what exactly to offer. And then she received a notification that pleasantly surprised her. She had been promoted. This event did not go unnoticed and made her feel a little more important in this world. She couldn't even imagine that this was possible, because before, when she was doing her streams, there were only ordinary silver and gold buttons, and there was nothing unusual about it. But this rank was very special. Perhaps it was connected to some fictional world in which she had never managed to figure out what exactly this status meant. She realized that she was short of sugar, and this became a kind of signal for her that she needed to have a snack on something sweet. A handle of candy was at hand, and she began to eat it with pleasure. The girl told her nanny that she wanted more candy. The nanny replied that she could only give her one before the meal because she couldn't eat more before the main meal. After that, the girl received a reward for leveling up. But then suddenly, everyone felt an unimaginable explosion that literally shook them with its powerful impact. The whole room was filled with fear as the candy slipped from the princess's hands, as if the very atmosphere was tense and foreshadowed something terrible. The girl immediately recognized that these were the sounds of monsters. She was already accustomed to such sounds and intuitively understood that a great danger was about to begin. The service that needed to be performed was associated with a serious threat. There was an infected werewolf in the castle that needed to be quickly neutralized. An urgent order was given to prepare arrows in order to deal with this dangerous creature, which could pose a great threat, as quickly as possible. The girl's uncle dealt with this monster, showing excellent skills and determination. He confidently approached the werewolf and immediately began to act. Uncle took control of the situation, approached the creature, and pulled out its heart. It was quick and without any problems, as if everything had been planned in advance. The girl was frightened by what was happening, but the nanny calmed her down, explaining that knights and wizards always fight such monsters to protect the world and people. A princess shouldn't feel afraid, but the girl looked really scared. She kept crying, which was evident in her facial expression and behavior. They tried to convey to the girl that they were completely safe, but she could not calm down. Whether she understood this at that moment remains a question. They reminded the princess that she would have to thank everyone who had supported her. This reminder was important, especially for a girl in such an alarming situation. In fact, the girl is not afraid of monsters because she has already lived through 2 lives. People sometimes turn out to be much scarier than the creatures she could meet. She didn't feel used, like she was just a puppet in someone else's hands. This gave her some relief and self-confidence that she would not be harmed. Those evil men had taken more than just years from her. She had suffered losses, but hope for a better life was on the horizon, albeit in unexpected ways. However, the girl had not yet realized what kind of luck she was really looking for. For now, her soul was too restless to understand what she really needed. As the monster came too close, the girl felt a sharp fear. This feeling engulfed her, making her heart beat faster in terror. The monster grabbed the carriage, and its huge hands were almost inside. It was so close that its presence filled the space with an ominous feeling. The girl's nanny Shushu tried to protect her from danger in every possible way. She understood that the situation was critical and did everything to protect her little charge. A few seconds later, Shushu's uncle, Berg Willow, appeared in the carriage. He quickly grabbed the girl in his arms and hugged her. Shushu felt relieved because he was her salvation. At this point, the girl began calling for her nanny, her voice trembling with fear. She was looking for comfort and reassurance. But most of all, she wanted it all to go away. Fear gripped her little heart, and she asked the nanny if she would be all right. The nanny reassured the girl, saying that she was safe and had nothing to be afraid of. The uncle closed the girl's eyes, trying to hide from her the horror that was happening around them. He did not want her to see the violence that they were forced to endure at that moment. Shushu tried to understand what was happening and said that she could not see anything. She decided that it was better not to look so as not to see something that she might not survive. The girl was clearly upset, but her uncle said it didn't matter. He explained that if it had been his subordinate, he would have dealt with the enemy without hesitation. Shushu tried to believe his words, thinking that he was just trying to calm her down. Her uncle warned her not to open her eyes because there were many wolf carcasses around. The girl, turning to her uncle, said that she was very scared. He just remained silent, unable to console her, with words absorbed in his thoughts and worries about what was happening. A little while later, the uncle finally broke the silence, declaring that all the werewolves were dead, but the girl continued to claim that she still felt great fear and could not calm down. In response, the uncle said that there was no need to worry, he was next to her and would definitely protect her. This calmed the girl down a little, but the fear remained, and she continued to be nervous, trying to cope with anxiety. The system refreshed again, and the list of people who had entered the chat appeared on the screen again. There was the Duke, whose presence was increasingly alarming to the girl, despite the ordinariness of his appearance. The aunt, talking with her uncle, mentioned that the girl was too cowardly, to which the girl thought that it was difficult not to be afraid in such a situation, when the unknown and danger surrounded on all sides. Later, the girl also received a message from the Duke, who wrote that she was very different from her son. And this statement made her wonder what exactly it was about her that stood out so much. After some time, a notification came that she had received 2 points of interest from her uncle. This was unexpected, and the girl did not quite understand what exactly she had done to deserve such a rating. The girl asked her uncle to let her go so she could be alone for a while, but her uncle reminded her with a slight remark that he had already heard from her how afraid she was, and therefore he could not just let her go. The girl began to rush about, convincing him that he was angry because of her. She tried to explain that we were talking about events that happened 3 days ago, and she was not to blame for what happened. He warned her not to look back because the carcass was still there, and the cloud was hanging over the battlefield. This meant that she still couldn't relax. At that moment, they were drawn into a fight with 5 werewolves. The fight was brutal, and the forces were unequal, but the girl fought bravely despite her age and fragility. The servant watching what was happening noted that if he meant Her Majesty, then the Empress was only 7 years old at the time of the fight with the werewolves when she caught one. The gentleman added that at the age of 5, she caught 2 more, which was even more amazing. By this, he wanted to emphasize her outstanding abilities and strength from a very early age. The Empress was her mother, and legend had it that the first of the Willow family in his youth had killed a dragon. It was known that the blood of this family was mixed with the blood of a dragon. It was because of this ancient legend that it was often discussed that it was impossible to become a great general or prosecutor unless you carried the power of a dragon within you. This is what made their lineage so unique. The girl's uncle tried to explain to her that Willow's blood flows in her veins and that her abilities are not accidental. He wanted her to understand the importance of her heritage and the power in her soul. She was able to see his thoughts since he could not hide them. After a while, the gentleman came up and reported that all traces had been removed from the field, and it was possible to move on. The uncle let the girl go, and the nanny immediately rushed to her, ready to hug and calm her down. The girl was still a little excited, but she knew that there were always caring people nearby. The nanny thought that the princess was incredibly scared, and now fortunately, everything was over. The girl was glad that everything was over and had already begun to calm down, realizing that everything was fine. Today she was going to enjoy the sweet treat that had been prepared for her, because the old lady always made sure that the princess had everything she needed to be in a good mood. The girl could not contain her delight when a whole mountain of sweets appeared in front of her. It was real magic for the little princess, and she happily began to distribute them to those around her. If this werewolf was infected, then it was essentially just a minor monster, not a serious threat. It was insignificant enough for those who were ready to fight something more dangerous. For the people who decided to conquer the dragon, it seemed insignificant. However, the princess, although she felt difficulties, understood perfectly well that every step in such a matter has its price and responsibility. One of the servants noticed that the princess looked at him strangely. He did not know what she wanted to say, but he was sure that her look carried some deep meaning that could not pass by. Approaching the servant, the girl told him that they had all worked well, and that the nanny had given them some sweets. She felt confident and proud that she could thank those who had helped her in such an important matter. She gave one of the candies to the knight, who was touched by her attention. It was a small but important act of kindness that proved very meaningful to everyone around her. The princess brought more candies for the other knights. Everyone was amazed by her generosity and attention. Everyone was happy with such a gesture because the candies became a small but sincere gift for them. For the knights and servants, these sweets became a real treat that they would remember for a long time. Never before had they felt that their work was so generously rewarded. The girl approached, and smiling said that she would give him the most beautiful and delicious candy. It was her little magic. She felt that she deserved this gratitude. The princess explained that she used special magic to make the spell truly powerful. This added to the mystery of her actions, making everything that happened even more surprising to those around her. Then the sorceress said that the whole country should be proud of its princess. It was a great recognition that raised the spirits of everyone around, because everyone saw how she spread goodness and magic. The chat could indeed contain the same words that the person had used before. This seemed strange, but at the same time logical, since the princess and her entourage often repeated the same phrases. She approached. Her uncle gave him the candy and thanked him for saving her. It was a sincere confession of her gratitude because her uncle was always there and helped her in difficult moments. The uncle noticed that the girl was holding her favorite candy in her hands and said with a smile that he knew her preferences well. The girl confirmed that this was indeed the case and that she could not be mistaken. But the uncle was ready to help and save, so the girl did not object. She was ready to give him her favorite candy because it was important for her that the uncle was nearby. Uncle smiled back and said that gratitude had always been a part of Willow's family, and it showed even in small things like that moment with the candy. He carefully took the candy from her hands, and the girl looking at him asked again if he wanted to take it with him. She could not help but feel excited at that moment. She thought that perhaps her uncle had not only accepted her gift, but was going to take it with him. She wanted that to be the case because she enjoyed his company. She hoped that this was so because she would very much like to spend as much time as possible with these people who had become important and dear to her. Smiling, the girl said that she really wanted to be part of Willow's family, and she would also like to live among people who she truly liked and understood. She approached her uncle and, looking at him with childish hope, asked him to pick her up in his arms so that she could feel safe and close to those she loved. But then her gaze was drawn to something strange behind her. It was a wolfhound, which seemed to be something unusual and very impressive. The girl guessed that it could be the king of the werewolves himself. She felt that there was something threatening next to him, like a huge and scary monster that was ready to attack. But to her surprise, the wolfhound was holding in his mouth not something scary, but something completely different, which caused the girl's surprise and curiosity. In its mouth, she noticed a small, cute creature that looked completely defenseless, and this made her feel a strange tenderness towards this creature. The girl, without thinking, asked for the creature to be released. She felt how the little mortals who held it could not understand how harmless it was. Then the girl finally realized that in front of her was not just a strange creature, but a desert fox. Her view of the world suddenly changed, and she felt something important in this moment. If this is indeed a desert fox, then it is incredibly lucky because these creatures are rarely encountered by people and certainly do not just show up, especially in such places. The fox was completely white, which looked especially strange. Such an animal should not be here, and it is unclear how it ended up in these parts at all. But the girl thought that maybe the fox had been living in this place for a long time, hiding from people, and simply never showing itself to anyone until this moment. When the girl asked her uncle what kind of creature it was, the fox immediately became angry and seemed to be mentally indignant at how she dared to ask such a question. The uncle did not understand what all this was about and thought that the girl was perhaps talking about the barking sound they had recently heard, which resembled a dog's. He admitted that he did not understand at all what she meant, and then the girl realized that it seemed that she was the only one who heard the fox's voice. Then the uncle decided that it was possible to at least try to logically guess where the fox came from and why it was behaving so unusually. This required reflection. The girl was shocked when her uncle started talking about this. She didn't understand what he meant at all and felt a little lost. The servant asked the master whether it was worth recording this strange incident in the journal. He nodded slightly, agreeing with her suggestion. The wolfhound had an object hidden in his mouth, wrapped in a strange scarlet cloth, and it seemed he was guarding it as if it were something very important and personal. When they finally got the find, it turned out to be a living creature. At first, they thought it was an animal, but then they realized it was sacred. The girl remembered that moment forever, because at that second, she realized that she was holding in front of her not just an animal, but a sacred creature. He and the knights watched as the soldiers carefully cleared the area, removing the mutilated corpse of a werewolf, infected with dark magic that spread fear and corruption. A sacred animal is a special creature, a symbol of faith and devotion, which people worshipped, considering it a messenger of divine power and a bearer of light. It is precisely such creatures that are capable of driving out evil, cleansing the earth of filth. But the cute fox seemed too ordinary, not like the famous sacred animals. And so, the uncle, frowning, asked again whether the servant had made a mistake in his words, because such a mistake could have led to unacceptable consequences. The servant firmly confirmed that he was confident in his words, adding that the information received was verified and confirmed by reliable sources. Another servant standing nearby also stated that he saw and heard everything himself, and in his opinion what was said was completely true. Despite this, everything that was happening seemed a little strange, too unexpected, as if something important remained hidden from everyone. At the scene of the events, an object was found that had long been considered to have disappeared somewhere within the empire, as if it had simply vanished without a trace. There were rumors that sacred animals do not live just anywhere. They only appear where the land is clean and filled with blessings. Even the girl knew about it, because it was the fox who screamed for people to show concern, as if she understood her importance and significance. One of the servants, slightly confused, turned to the master with the question, should she not report what she had seen to the imperial family as soon as possible? However, the second servant intervened, believing that if the emperor were to be told the truth, it would be better to indicate in the report that the sacred animal had been stolen. As they tried to figure out what to do next, it became clear that the situation was more complicated than it had seemed at first, and everything required caution. What they saw was indeed a sacred creation. But first they had to burn the werewolf bodies using cleansing magic, and it was decided to take the fox herself with them in order to release her later, because the presence of people irritated her and caused obvious discontent. The master ordered to be extremely careful with her. Despite her small size, she possessed enormous strength, and this complicated the task. 5 trained knights tried their best, but even their magic spells failed. She tore and slipped away too fast and strong even for them. It was worth being distracted, even a little, as she was already slipping away. But this is a sacred creature, and if you let her go, the consequences can be very serious. At that moment they remembered. An old legend said that such animals obey only one person, their real master, and no one else. But the secret is that almost no one knows how exactly to tame it. Even the wisest of the wise have not yet been able to unravel this ancient method. Shushu looked at the fox as if trying to understand her, and the fox in response looked attentively straight into the girl's eyes, as if searching for something in them. Shushu suddenly decided that she was fed up with all this. She turned away and mentally promised herself that she would leave, not get involved in this, and forget. But suddenly, the fox, as if hearing her thoughts, called out to her and told the girl to stop, because in front of her stood a real human child. The girl turned around abruptly. It took her a moment to realize that the fox was speaking to her directly, as if she knew her. The fox bowed her head slightly and seemed to smile. She said that the girl could understand her, and she had known this for a long time. The girl showed that she did not hear, but the fox did not stop. She continued to scream, assuring everyone that the girl understood her perfectly well and was simply pretending that this was not the case. The fox was furious. Her irritation was visible to the naked eye. She insistently demanded that the girl immediately turn around and at least glance in her direction, not hiding her indignation. The fox's voice was so shrill that it was unbearable to be near it. It was so tense that it seemed that the ears were about to shake from the force of the sound causing pain. The girl approached her uncle and asked with concern in her voice if she could hold the fox in her arms for just a moment. Her words sounded like a sincere request filled with hope. The fox seemed to be trying to coax the girl, whispering to her to take her in her arms. The plump little fox radiated something in her manner that made her desire tangible, but the girl firmly remembered the important prohibition. The fox resorted to trickery and, whispering with a smile, said that if the girl still decided to take her, then she, in turn, would allow her to touch her soft tail, which seemed like a tempting offer. The girl literally melted with delight and, without holding back her emotions, began to persistently ask that she be given the opportunity to hold the fox in her arms at least once. Her request sounded sincere and full of childish naivety. However, the uncle, continuing to shake his head firmly, repeated that this was absolutely impossible, that it was strictly forbidden. It became clear that it would no longer be possible to convince him otherwise on this issue, no matter how hard the girl tried. The girl wanted to touch the fox's tail so much that she was almost ready to agree to any conditions, even those that contradicted her desires, just to avoid a quarrel with her uncle and get at least a small opportunity. At this point, the little princess suddenly stopped crying. She seemed to sense that her uncle had begun to doubt and was now perhaps ready to change his mind, which gave her hope. He took a deep breath and, after a short pause, said that perhaps they could just place the fox next to the girl, preventing her from picking it up. It was a compromise that suited him. This decision made the girl happy to tears, because now she would at least be able to touch the fox a little. The fox, as if sensing something special, approached the girl and gently gave her her fluffy tail. Everyone immediately began to whisper that the princess was simply wonderful, so kind and sweet. People around immediately began to repeat that the fox must not be touched under any circumstances. It is a sacred creature, and no one has dared to touch it until now. But when the girl carefully touched the fox, it, contrary to all expectations, did not run away or hiss, but on the contrary pressed itself against her and began to stroke herself as if it had been waiting for this for a long time. Everyone around froze in surprise. Nuga once said that if you touch this creature, it can bite you right away, showing sharp teeth and scaring everyone to the point of trembling. But the girl wasn't scared. She just smiled warmly and whispered that the fox was so soft, like a cloud. No fear, only kindness and calm. Someone explained to her that only the master has the right to touch such creatures. One of the servants added that sacred animals obey only the one who is recognized as their master. Many people knew about it, and that was the reason why they advised her to try it. Everyone wanted to make sure that she was really special, since the fox did not show any anger towards her. When another person tried to repeat this and touch the fox, it suddenly recoiled and growled suddenly, turning into a wild and aggressive creature. The fox, without hesitation, jumped straight into the princess's arms, as if she intuitively knew that this was where she would be completely safe. She decided that she would never want to trust anyone else but her. The girl immediately felt her eyes fill with a bright light of joy. She realized that from the very beginning, she had sensed something great, almost divine in the fox, and she was not mistaken in her premonition. The princess held her tightly and lovingly, as if protecting her from the outside world. The fox sat quietly, did not object, as if she completely agreed that this was how it should be. Those who were especially surprised were those who could never have imagined that the princess would hold an animal in her hands with such ease and calmness, as if it were the most natural thing. But when all the details fell into place, and everyone saw how their assumptions began to be justified, the feeling strengthened in their hearts. They really were right all along. The little fox told the girl that it was she who had been chosen by the block as that very point, important and significant, which everyone knew about, but until now had not realized. Shushu sank into deep thought, pondering the fox's words. This was no accident, not just a whim of fate, but a carefully considered choice that had been made from somewhere above, intended only for her. Perhaps it all happened exactly when she returned, when everything around her suddenly fell into place, and many things became much clearer than ever before. With these thoughts, the girl smiled gently, running her hand over the fox's soft fur, as if thanking her for her trust and for the important words that she managed to say at that moment. At that moment, a familiar bag appeared in front of the girl. It was the same object that had been mentioned earlier, and which she was supposed to open only after some time, as was said. The system reported that Shushu had managed to obtain God's gift. This happened because the girl had managed to establish a connection with the animal, and also had collected the required number of interest points, as indicated. Then she realized something important. Perhaps this little fox could hear her thoughts. He responded to them with amazing precision, as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. The fox, confirming this, made it clear that this was indeed the case. Although she did not speak words, her actions clearly showed that she heard the girl, and did so with full awareness. Moreover, the little animal explained that he was not just an ordinary fox. In fact, he was a messenger of the god Rickshaw, who had come on an important mission to carry out the task that had been entrusted to him. He acted as an observer, watching every action of the people. When his mission was completed, he was to ascend high into the heavens, returning to where he came from, with his task accomplished. The girl, a little confused, decided to clarify his words, to which the fox confidently confirmed again. Yes, he watches every action, everyone without exception, not missing a single action. The fox approached her with special attention. It was clear, only to the girl could he offer real support, unlike all the others who could not understand his true intentions. The others were unable to comprehend what was happening. And when the girl finally returned to reality, her face expressed fear and anxiety. This was due to the fact that her discovery had stunned her. They had all secretly known about her ability for a long time, but now that they saw it with their own eyes, they realized that the princess had somehow managed to tame a sacred creature that was thought to be impossible. One touch is not enough to become the owner. Even if the animal does not resist, it does not immediately accept the person. Everyone could not contain their delight. The princess was able to tame this creature, and at that moment, she seemed to everyone to be truly the best of the best. The girl amazed everyone with her act, causing a real storm of admiration. The number of interest points she received was practically a record, and at that moment, no one expected such a turn of events. However, the system warned that due to event overload, some messages would not be processed. Too many things were happening at once, and something had to be excluded to avoid errors. The little animal tried his best to convey to those around him that they should retreat further away, and also asked the girl to convey his request to them, because he considered her his confidant. The girl's head was spinning from all the attention she was suddenly getting. There were so many eyes, so many words, and all these feelings came crashing down on her at once, leaving her slightly confused. Suddenly, the Duke's loud voice was heard demanding that everyone freeze in place. He ordered that no unnecessary movements be made, as the situation required complete control and calmness from everyone present. The fox froze in confusion, not understanding whose voice he had just heard, and what this command meant. Everything happened so quickly and unexpectedly that the little animal did not have time to figure out what to do. He turned to the girl and asked who this man was, whose speech had so greatly changed the behavior of everyone around him. From now on, they will have to remain silent if they value their sight. After all, the one who spoke does not forgive curiosity. This was the Duke's strong-willed order, and the girl Shushu could not understand why all this was happening and why she was drawn into something she did not want. The Duke threatened that if anyone tried to inform on him, he would tear out their eyes and ears before they even got one step closer to the palace. The woman asked the girl if the man was her guardian, as there was a special connection and trust between them. In fact, it was her own uncle, and the fox cub admitted that it was the first time he had seen a person with such incredible strength and charisma. This power, he says, will only be recognized as real if he defeats the legendary fire dragon Ataitu. If this had happened, he would have become the greatest man in history. But alas, the emperors of his former life destroyed him with deception. The sacred beast suddenly spoke to the girl, pestered her, and said that now he knew exactly the name of his real owner. The girl was taken aback, and he explained. If she didn't know this before, Now let her understand. After touching her, she became his mistress. She was in complete shock and even a little offended, not understanding the essence, and the fox cub only calmly replied that it was too late. She was his mistress. However, the girl was not against it, and with a slight smile, she hugged the warm and fluffy sacred beast, not feeling any fear. This fox turned out to be so soft, cozy, and incredibly warm that it was very pleasant for her to snuggle up to her again and again. 2 days passed, and they were again riding in a traveling carriage, heading to a new point, accompanied by servants and guards. The fox cub settled comfortably on her lap and fell asleep, and the girl already felt uneasy. Her legs were numb, and her body began to ache. The uncle carefully took the fox cub from her feet, deciding to help his niece at least a little, so that she could move calmly. But the little fox began to speak discontentedly, demanding that he be released immediately and that his peace not be disturbed without reason. He even asked the girl why she was just silent and doing nothing, but she pretended not to hear him at all. While he was sleeping peacefully on her knee, the girl's legs went completely numb, and she couldn't move. She became incredibly bored. The girl quietly complained and asked her uncle to hug her, and the gentleman, putting the little animal down, gently pressed the girl to himself. He picked her up in his arms, and the girl immediately broke into a joyful smile, feeling warmth and protection. When he looked at her, he smiled tenderly, as if his heart was warmed by her childish affection. Last time the carriage overturned, and then the girl was confused, not understanding what was happening and how to react. The servants reported that the carriage had broken down, and that she must now transfer to another one, where she would ride next to her master. And the nanny, along with the rest of the servants, had to sit in another carriage so as not to create unnecessary crowding. The nanny assured them that everything would be fine, and gently asked the girl how she felt about the situation. If Shushu didn't like something, she was strictly told to speak up immediately without hiding it. She was taught that silence could lead to big misunderstandings. The Duke never mentioned that she could ride with a nanny if she wished. Usually only his wife heirs or acknowledged vassals rode with him. He wasn't as indifferent as she thought. There was attention in his gaze, concern in his actions, and it was a little confusing to her. The Duke said that their journey was coming to an end, and they would arrive soon. His voice was calm, as if it was just a formality. The girl looked at him in surprise, and he added that soon the temple they were so eager to see would appear ahead. When the temple appeared before her eyes, Shushu seemed to freeze. She did not expect such grandeur and beauty. She could not even imagine anything like that. She couldn't understand how they managed to cover the distance in 5 days. She thought it should have taken much longer. The uncle said that they would soon find themselves in the city, but the girl still could not understand how the road turned out to be so short. He handed her some more candy, which made Shushu delighted, but he soon noticed that her reaction seemed insincere. Then he assumed that it was probably not candy that she was expecting. Although the girl was happy, there was something else inside her, anxiety or excitement. All the time she only ate and slept, not noticing how the days passed. When she realized that they had already arrived, she felt sad to part with her dear people. Shushu suddenly burst into tears, not understanding what had touched her so much. Fox watched her in confusion, not knowing how to calm her down. The girl felt like everything would become distant again. The fox didn't understand anything, but she saw that Shushu was deep in thought about something important. The fox asked again if the girl wanted to stay with this man forever. There was an unexpected understanding in her voice. The girl nodded, slightly smiled, and winked at the fox, as if confirming that everything was exactly as it was. She didn't want to part. Then the little fox thought that she could easily lure this man, because Shushu was clearly attached to him, and this could be used. But the girl herself did not know how to do this, and her uncle suddenly told her that all the candies were gone, which upset her greatly. He promised that he would fulfill his promise in the city, and she should not worry. Very soon, everything would be as she wanted. He promised to give her as many figs as she could eat, and more. He was not going to go back on that. Shushu was delighted by this news. A plan had already formed in her head on how to use her uncle's generosity to her advantage. She didn't pay attention to the fox's words and just listened to her uncle. He said that they would only stay in the city for a day and she could take a walk. The fox was indignant. It was stupid to go alone. I had to call my uncle. Hearing this, Shushu nevertheless obeyed and called my uncle with her. He asked again in surprise if she was joking and if she really wanted to go for a walk with him, since he had a lot of things to do. She nodded confidently, looking up at him with new eyes that held a determination not typical of little girls. Then the uncle replied that he was very busy, but the girl reminded him of his promise, and her voice sounded confident that he would not refuse. He was at a loss. The promise had nothing to do with the walk, but there was no point in arguing with the girl now. She clearly wouldn't give in. He sighed and agreed. He said that if it was for a short time, he would go. Shushu smiled triumphantly, having achieved her goal. The fox showed her a sign of approval with her paw. The girl was even happier. It seemed to her that everything was going just as it should. But the uncle suddenly remarked that this might be their last meeting. His voice sounded quiet, but with a special sadness. The girl suddenly became sad, her joy disappeared, and a strange expression appeared on her face, as if she suddenly realized how much she could lose. This time, Shushu was sure that she had to win Berg over to her side at all costs, otherwise all her plans would be meaningless and would collapse. Only a few hours passed, and now the dusty carriage entered the city limits, where stone houses gave way to busy streets and the noise of carts. Shushu still couldn't understand how to deal with her uncle. He was like a frozen iceberg, dry, strict, unapproachable, and not at all inclined to tenderness. She didn't know how to get through to his heart like a melting cloud of cotton candy and make him care about her, at least a little bit, and want to help. The main thing is to do it in such a way that he himself offers to take her to the north without suspecting that this is part of Shushu's own cunning plan. But the more she thought, the more everything became confused in her head, like a tangled ball in which neither the beginning nor the end could be found. She hoped that if she was close to him, like when she was broadcasting online, everything would work out for her. She knew how to be convincing then. In life it was different. Without a screen in front of her eyes and an audience behind the scenes, she began to get lost, stutter, and avoid direct eye contact. Maybe that's why it was easier for her to talk in the chat. In virtual reality, words sounded more confident, thoughts formed more clearly. The fox, noticing her strange behavior, asked what she was doing, because Shushu was just sitting with her eyes closed, as if she had withdrawn into herself. She answered briefly that she was thinking, and if she recalled her previous life, she was not at all a capable ruler or a worthy empress. Quite the contrary. She was a lousy ruler, and her reign was filled with suffering, pain, and regrets that she did not want to remember. And if you look back, it seems that those parts were full of people, but none of them showed kindness. Cold indifference reigned there. Even the blacksmiths and architects of the great Huaxiang fortress did not seem kind to her. They were all preoccupied with themselves and did not notice the pain of others. And yet among them, she remembered one young official who unexpectedly stood out from the gray and indifferent crowd. Just before her arrest and the start of the riots in Astana, there was not a single person nearby who would express sympathy or defend her. Even the servants of the fortress looked down on her, as if she were not a person, but just an empty space devoid of meaning and dignity. Because of this, she often cried, unable to cope with the loneliness and resentment that made her heart clench and her hands tremble. And then this official said out loud for the first time that those around her were too cruel to her, and no one had the right to treat her like that. She sat on the cold floor in tears when she heard his voice, and even raised her head, not believing that someone protected her. He claimed that she was not at all to blame for those terrible executions. He said it was absurd because she would not have decided to do something like that, even under pressure. He reminded everyone that she had just turned 21, and then she saw his back, confident, straight, like a real knight. She was never able to see his face, and 10 days later she was taken out of the cell where the death penalty awaited her. When she was grabbed and thrown into a cell, those words of the official appeared before her eyes, like the last ray of light in pitch darkness. She bitterly regretted that she never saw his face, as if she had missed the only kind image in her short life. After this, a harsh order followed. She was executed without even being allowed to say goodbye to anyone, and no one else said a word of support to her. After all, he was the last one who supported her and did not turn away when everyone else did. Just before his death, he stood by her side and she remembered it. Now everything had changed, and the world around her had become completely different. People, events, even her own feelings. Everything was not the same as before. Everything had changed beyond recognition. If such an opportunity suddenly presented itself, she would very much like to see that official again, at least for a moment, just to understand who he really was. If there is even the slightest chance, she will not let it pass. She intends to seize this moment because it is important to her, even if no one else understands it. The beast turned to the girl and asked her a question. He wanted to know what she was thinking about all the time, despite what was happening, as if nothing existed around her. She thought about how she could stay close to her uncle. He said that she should not forget that his mistress was destined to live in wealth, and he himself deserved it. Since they are now together and will act together, they should think alike. They are a union, and every little thing should now be discussed and decided together. She doesn't have much time left, and everything is complicated by the fact that her uncle is not around now. And without him, many things become more difficult and even scarier. She still can't figure out what exactly she should do. Her thoughts are all jumbled up, but she needs to pull herself together and focus because she simply has no other choice. A little while later, they arrived at the place, and all her previous thoughts evaporated. The girl completely switched to what was happening around. The servants told her that there was a store nearby that sold only toys. This news immediately caught her attention. Her eyes lit up with joy. The girl immediately said that she really wanted to look at these toys. Her voice was full of sincere impatience and childish delight. She had once heard that there was a huge toy store on one of the streets of the capital, but she had never been near it before. And now seeing him with her own eyes for the first time, she was shocked. Such a sight seemed to her a real miracle, and she could not look away. She had no toys as a child. Her uncle noticed that the ones she chose seemed of poor quality, but she got angry. For her, it was a special toy. She added that she loves them with all her heart. Sweets are of course more important to her, but toys come right after, and nothing can change that. Then Duke joined her chat. He left a message that his son was not like that at all and seemed surprised by this himself, comparing their behavior. He didn't understand where such differences came from. And the girl at that time received 2 points. It seemed interesting to her, although a little strange. Even if he's arguing somewhere in another window, she can't use it against him. Even though she knows what he's thinking, she holds back. Uncle often says things about her, in his thoughts, that hurt her feelings. She feels it, and it hurts her soul, because he doesn't care how she feels next to him. She wanted to believe that at least during this time the slightest friendly connection would arise between them. But alas, she was wrong, and his attitude towards her has not changed. He still cannot stand her. Suddenly, one of the servants approached her and suggested that they go for a walk. The girl hopefully asked if she was really allowed to go out, because she really wanted at least some fresh air and a change. The servant replied, with a smile, that if she wanted to see the city, nothing would stop her. She could choose any place for a walk, and no one would stop her or restrict her. When she heard this, several knights immediately began to argue among themselves. Each wanted to be the one who would accompany her on her walk because it gave them the opportunity to be near her. However, the argument soon escalated, and the knights began to accuse each other of dishonesty. Each was convinced that his opponent was trying to outplay him by using unfair means to gain an advantage. The reason was quite obvious. The wizard always won, and the knights demanded a rematch hoping that luck would finally smile on one of them, and they would be able to achieve the long-awaited victory. The servant, feeling tired of their arguments, advised the princess to wait a little. The men had to decide among themselves which of them would accompany her on the walk, and this question required a decision. The princess smiled and nodded, agreeing to wait a little. She even found it amusing to watch all this fuss because she had never seen men argue so much over trifles. After that, she looked at the nanny who was holding a fluffy fox in her hands, who seemed to understand everything, and silently watched what was happening. The girl, looking at the fox, suddenly said that she urgently needed to get this toy, as if she could not be without it. Her desire was so sincere that it was almost irresistible. The fox, surprised by her words, asked why she called him a toy, since he was alive and able to talk. He tried to understand why she did not notice the obvious. The little fox noticed that he really felt hungry and wanted to eat. However, the girl, without thinking again, called him a toy, not paying attention to what he was saying. The fox muttered angrily that she was hungry too, and that it wasn't funny at all. After all, if they wanted to go for a walk, they had to eat first, so as not to be without strength. Uncle intervened gently and said with slight surprise that first they needed to have a snack and rest, and only after that they could think about a walk or other activities. The girl was genuinely surprised by this order. She did not expect that food and rest would be a priority, because in her mind, a walk was much higher on the list of important things to do. The fox, hearing her uncle's words, whispered with satisfaction that now she understood that this strong man really knew what to do. He always decided everything correctly and to the point. In fact, everyone should have eaten a long time ago. After all, if they didn't do it in time, their strength might leave them, and they were still planning to go for a walk and didn't want to be weak on the way. The girl confessed to her nanny that she doesn't like to stay hungry, and if she asks for food, it means she really needs to eat something urgently, otherwise she won't be able to function normally. The uncle was a little surprised to hear that the girl was still hungry. After all, they had all just eaten snacks. He quietly turned away, not wanting to show how puzzled he was by this situation. After thinking for a while, Uncle suggested going to a restaurant where everyone could choose something to their taste. It was convenient, and everyone could enjoy what they liked. When they arrived at the restaurant, the staff greeted them with honor and attention. It seemed as if they were being treated as special guests, ready to be attended to at any time of the day. The girl sat the fox down next to her, not wanting to let him go, even for lunch. She had become so attached to this animal that she could not imagine a single moment without him by her side. During their journey, knights and wizards showed unusual kindness and care. They did not put themselves above others. They were attentive to everyone regardless of their status or position in society. All people were equal in their eyes, and it did not matter to them who was from what class. They did not divide people into rich and poor, but accepted everyone without exception, no matter how different they were. At the table, everyone ate the same food without picking at dishes or expressing dissatisfaction. This created an atmosphere of friendliness where everyone felt part of a common company without dividing into us and them. Special attention was paid to the choice of dishes for the princess. They tried to select dishes that she would like, so that she would feel comfortable and cozy among their friendly company. This distinguished them from the courtiers who lived in the imperial palace, where tension always reigned. There someone was always dissatisfied with something, and everyone thought only of their own interests. The girl began to eat, and the fox cub sitting next to her was happy about this moment. He knew that now everyone would be able to eat, and everyone would feel a little better, and the atmosphere would become even more relaxed. But suddenly, the girl felt a strange drowsiness coming over her. Her eyes began to stick together, and her body became heavier. A feeling of fatigue overcame her, and she could hardly keep from falling asleep. She was completely overcome with sleep, and she could barely keep from falling. But the little fox noticed this and tried to warn her. Despite her tiredness, the girl thought about asking her nanny for some sweets. Candy could cheer her up, but the nanny was busy at that moment. She was also eating, so she might not notice the request right away, and the girl decided not to distract her. And suddenly, the girl began to lose her balance, staggered, and the fox who was sitting next to her was the first to fall to the floor. Then the maid approached the princess and gently reminded her that perhaps it really was time to get some sleep. The girl Shushu was so tired that she could no longer resist sleep. Her eyes closed, her legs tangled, and it seemed that she was about to fall asleep standing up. Everyone present seemed enchanted when they looked at her. Some were touched, others could hardly hide their admiration, as if there was something special about her. Nanny Nini noticed that the princess was clearly overtired. She fell asleep right in her arms, sweaty with damp temples and heavy intermittent breathing. Duke Berg Willow frowned and asked the maid what exactly she had just said because it seemed important to him. The nanny did not immediately understand what the Duke meant, so with slight excitement, she asked what words he was referring to. The gentleman asked if the girl was really covered in sweat, and the nanny nodded, confirming that she had noticed it when she fell asleep. The Duke suggested that if she had fallen asleep sweating, perhaps she was ill with something. But the nanny reassured him, saying that this often happened to children. She explained that small children may have a higher body temperature than usual, and therefore, such reactions of the body are quite acceptable. Then the uncle noticed that the girl could simply be overtired because she had had a busy day, and the meeting with the werewolves added to the tension. He immediately turned to the servant standing next to him, looked at him sternly, and silently made it clear that he needed to act. Then he said out loud that he should go and get a doctor without delay. There was no time for doubt. The servant rushed to carry out the order, and the nanny was still trying to explain that perhaps it was not a cold, but just fatigue and accumulated tension. Nanny Nini looked extremely confused. Her eyes darted around. Her hands were shaking. It seemed that she was frightened, not only by the princess's heat, but also by the situation which had become tense. Duke Berg Willow had 3 sons, and always showed touching care for them, as if he was trying to compensate for what he himself had been deprived of in life. However, despite all his love for his children, he remained cold towards his wife, even in her last days, showing neither warmth nor regret for the one with whom he shared the house. The Duke sternly asked why the servant was still standing, and did not call a doctor since time was running out, and to hesitate now would mean risking the child's life. The man immediately rushed to carry out the order, because the Duke's voice sounded firm. There was not a hint of hesitation in it, only determination and anxiety. Everyone was surprised. No one had ever seen the Duke so excited before. His concern for his niece seemed sincere and truly rare. The servants began to get confused in their actions, not understanding what was happening and why the atmosphere in the house became so tense, as if a misfortune had happened. The Duke loudly ordered that a doctor be found immediately, and then everyone in the castle began to fuss, realizing that the situation had gone beyond the usual course of events. 10 minutes later, one of the servants returned, and with him was a doctor who had been found urgently without losing a minute of precious time. The servant reported that he had brought the best doctor in the area and expressed confidence that this specialist would be able to help in such an alarming situation. The doctor asked in surprise what had happened, because just 10 minutes ago, he had been resting peacefully, not suspecting that he would be urgently called. He added that he had not left the city for a long time, had not gone on business trips, and generally led a quiet, measured life, avoiding urgent matters. But the servant noted that it was better not to refuse now. His voice was trembling, and his eyes showed an understanding of the seriousness of the situation. The doctor then said that he usually did not agree to urgent calls for money, but this offer seemed to exceed all reasonable expectations. Seeing the amount that the Duke's envoy offered, he immediately changed his mind, got ready in a minute, and said that he was ready to go right now. The amount in question was truly staggering. It was not something you would refuse. It was not even money, but a fortune that could change your life. He came here not with good intentions, but for the reward. But as soon as he saw this monster, greed retreated before horror. Everything he saw within these walls seemed strangely right. So much nobility, as if every action here weighed 1,000 coins. He had dealt with dangerous people, the most brutal ones, but the one here made them all seem like stupid street thugs. He did not hesitate for a minute and ordered the doctor to be brought to the girl immediately. The hope for help was the only thing that still maintained balance. The doctor entered under dozens of heavy, angry glances. All these people seemed to be waiting for him to make a mistake and were ready to tear him apart. He felt every staring face, every emotion. He didn't understand what it was all for. He wanted only one thing: to go home. The doctor said he had completed his examination. He tried to say something, but everyone expected him to say only one thing: about the condition of this girl. He only hinted to the Duke that he should watch his words. This girl is not simple. She is a princess, and in his opinion, she simply fell asleep. Nini disagreed with the doctor. She confidently stated that she knew the princess better than anyone. She was simply tired and fell asleep, nothing more. But those around her disagreed. Everyone insisted that the princess's breathing was strange. She inhaled too rarely, once every 3 seconds. The servants and courtiers were outraged. They did not believe the doctor. They thought that he was lazy and did not want to treat the princess, only pretending. The doctor was scared. He didn't know why they had called him at all, if they didn't trust him. It seemed pointless and dangerous to him. If the princess really does breathe every 3 seconds, then what does he have to do with it? He's not a god to change her body. He claimed that she was not ill, but the Duke could not understand why she was covered in sweat and sleeping so soundly, as if her body was exhausted. The doctor confidently stated that children of this age usually sleep soundly, but the maid Nini still tried to object. The girl Shushu always slept like this. However, the Duke did not want to listen to either the maid or the doctor. This had not happened to his son, which meant that the girl was definitely ill. He decided with conviction. Then they thought it was worth looking for someone more experienced. The Duke asked what was considered the largest and most famous city in the area. They told him that there was a city called Karan nearby, but the journey there was long. If he decided to go, their journey would be even longer. The Duke, without going into details, stared at Luga with irritation, not understanding what the real problem was and why he couldn't just go straight away. In fact, Luga wanted to explain that because of the city's remoteness, they needed to leave as quickly as possible. The gentleman had changed everything for the princess. It looked strange. She became increasingly convinced that the Duke was completely unaware of how lost he was now, and how little he understood the situation. Nini's maid tried to explain the essence to him, but he didn't even bother to listen to her, as if all this wasn't worth a drop of his attention. The sorceress then intervened and said that she could call a good doctor through the portal if they allowed her to use magic. She asked that this task be entrusted to her, emphasizing how important it was that everything be done quickly and accurately. The Duke looked at her strangely for the first time. If she was still here, it meant she hadn't realized that he had already decided everything. The sorceress immediately set off on her journey, dragging another servant with her to speed up the entire process and not waste time. She hurried as fast as she could. Everything had to be done as quickly as possible. Princess Shushu urgently needed help. After a short time, they finished creating a magic circle, thanks to which they immediately teleported to the desired location. Because of magic, the girl accidentally dropped the spoon, and it almost immediately appeared next to her. The spoon began to fall, but the Duke noticed it in time and managed to grab it, preventing it from falling. The Duke was alert and quick to react, catching the spoon before it could fall to the floor or onto the girl. His actions were swift and decisive. They decided that they would stay in this city for one more day to finish all important business and give themselves time to rest. It was an important decision considering the circumstances. He also gave orders that the best accommodations nearby be found for the princess. He wanted her to feel as comfortable as possible, despite all the difficulties. When they found a place to stay for the night, they apologized to the princess. Although the city was large, the choice was limited. It was a small point, but suitable for an overnight stay. They found a place that was small but quite suitable. They quickly moved the girl so that she could rest, and hoped that she would be comfortable. The Duke noticed that the girl was bleeding like a stream, and immediately asked if magic could heal her. He was concerned about her condition, and was looking for a possible solution. The maid replied that the doctor had said that healing magic would not work. The princess was too young, and it could affect her condition, causing the opposite effect. He noticed that he had ordered the temperature in the room to be raised, but he did not understand why the servant had not done so. Yet he was irritated, but tried to control himself, worried about the princess's condition. The servant apologized and explained that the second platoon of mages was currently doing everything they could to fix the situation. It was taking longer than they expected, but they were not giving up. The wind was strong and cold, especially from the north, which made the process more difficult. The magicians worked with maximum efficiency, trying to cope with the difficult conditions and solve the problem. The maid was worried because she thought that the princess was just tired and fell asleep, but no one believed her. Her anxiety increased because she could not explain to anyone what was happening. The little fox wondered why the princess was in such a state. He thought that she was simply tired and fell asleep, but looking more closely, he realized that something was wrong, and his doubts grew stronger. The little fox was sure that she was not just sleeping. The doctor and others said that everything was fine, but it did not seem so simple to him. He felt that there was something more hidden. They spoke of it in whispers, afraid that someone would hear. As soon as the master gave the orders, they would carry them out, but if she was really sick, what then? Meanwhile, the girl lay quietly turning over in her sleep. Her face was peaceful, and she slept soundly in her bed as usual. Suddenly, she woke up and shuddering said that she was cold. She wondered what season it was and called her parents. Uncle was in complete shock upon hearing her words. He instantly remembered his sister and her husband, experiencing for a moment the memories of the past that overwhelmed him. The girl said that she did not want to go back to that place. She was scared. Her words filled the room with anxiety and worry. Her eyes expressed fear. She repeated how scared she was, and then her uncle, without thinking, picked her up. He tried to calm her down as best he could to relieve her anxiety. This overprotectiveness seemed to reach a new level, becoming more obvious. Everything around seemed tense, and the uncle could not find peace. At this point, another doctor reported that the princess had simply fallen asleep. He clarified that this was not due to anything serious, but rather to fatigue. He was a doctor who became famous for his characteristics and achievements. He brought with him a sorceress who was known for her wisdom and skills. The doctor noted that the princess was probably sleeping soundly due to fatigue, which was quite normal. Long journeys and stressful events could have exhausted her. He added that adults also have such moments. The princess is still small, and such difficult trips can have a significant impact on her, causing fatigue. In her past life, the girl had a difficult experience, so painful that others could not even imagine. These memories were too painful for her. The doctor, the gentleman trusted, had demonstrated his competence and earned his trust. He was a man who could be relied upon in such delicate situations. All the servants breathed a sigh of relief when they learned that the princess was not ill. The excitement was replaced by calm, and the working day could continue without unnecessary worries. The other girls noticed that the sorceress handled the situation very well. They were impressed by her abilities and determination, despite all the difficulties. However, the sorceress lost consciousness again. This happened due to the excessive use of magical energy, which affected her condition. Everyone immediately realized that she needed to be moved to a safe place. The servants rushed to help, as the sorceress's condition was far from normal. The servant approached the Duke and quietly told him something important. This was necessary in order to understand the situation and properly organize further actions. In the evening, everyone had already settled into their rooms, preparing for a night's rest, but soon they were called by the Duke, who suddenly demanded their presence. The Duke reported that the schedule had been suddenly changed, and everyone was expected to be here. This was due to the need to give the princess a day of rest, as she was very tired. The servants were delighted with this news, because they considered the princess their treasure. Thanks to her, they got a day off and could rest a little from their duties. One of the servants also said that he had an urgent report about Aiden. This was important, and everyone needed to be updated on the latest developments to avoid misunderstandings. The Duke, curious, asked what had happened this time. Perhaps Aiden had done something wrong again, and it was necessary to find out what exactly had happened. Aiden, the Duke's only apprentice, reported that the castle's outer wall had been damaged during training, causing concern that such incidents should not happen again. This time the destruction was much more extensive than the previous case, and the Duke assumed that the cause was the strong storm that had raged in recent days. However, this was not the real reason. The power this child possessed was too great, and it was imperative that it be controlled through regular training. He ordered the servant to convey to everyone that it was not worth training him until the Duke himself returned to personally intervene and ensure the safety of the process. Mogul Willow, the Duke's eldest son, should have been there to manage the situation. But while he was gone, only the Duke himself could take responsibility for the child's power. The servant bowed and replied that he understood the instructions perfectly and would certainly report to all who needed to be informed. After this, the Duke dismissed them, and everyone went about their business. All the employees were delighted. They sincerely considered the princess to be the light of their lives, a small ray of hope, and were immensely happy to have received the long-awaited day off. Thanks to the princess, they finally had a chance to rest. For many, it was a real relief, and they almost cried with happiness, realizing that they could relax. One of the senior workers said that he had been working under the Duke for 10 years and had never had a day off, but this was a very special situation that required attention. Every time someone looks at the princess, it immediately becomes obvious that her connection with the Duke is indeed very close, and the ties of kinship between them are palpable. Everyone thought so from the very first day. Everyone who saw the princess could not help but remember the Duke, because their appearance, manners, and behavior were strikingly similar. Scarlet Will, the current Duke's older sister and mother of the girl Shushu, left a significant mark on her family's history, and her influence is felt even after many years. This woman could have become more famous if she had lived, because her charisma and strength of spirit would have won respect not only among the Northerners, but throughout the entire territory. It was believed that blood cannot lie, and this opinion was shared by many. After all, the previous Duke was also distinguished by exceptional beauty, which only confirmed his origin. However, the princess amazed everyone with her beauty, and if she maintains it in the future, she could become the most famous and recognized woman on the entire continent. At this time, the nanny sitting carefully next to the girl could not help but notice how time quietly and imperceptibly passes while her pupil calmly plays or does other things. She was informed that today would be a special day because someone important was coming. This circumstance forced her to stay where she was because her vacation was postponed. When the nanny turned around, she realized that in front of her was not just an ordinary servant, but the Duke himself. His appearance was unexpected and a little alarming because such a visit was not expected. The maid said that there was no need to worry because he himself was very tired. Today he needed to rest a little to regain his strength after everything he had been through. She realized that it was useless to insist and advised him to take good care of the princess because this was her main concern and much depended on it. If the Duke had looked the same as he did when he first entered the princess's room, she would not have been able to escape all the consequences. Everything would have been exactly the same. But despite this, she still felt his gaze, which was full of mystery, when he looked at the princess. It could not be a simple coincidence. Perhaps there was another meaning hidden in it. He had changed a lot since then, and she hoped that these changes would only be for the better. Perhaps it was a good sign that foreshadowed something important and significant. After saying goodbye to the gentleman, she left the room, leaving the place where so much had happened. She felt that this was an important moment that needed to be experienced. The Duke looked at the girl, thinking that it was all so strange. He couldn't help but think that there was something deeper in her words than just childish naivety. He remembered the moment when she said she wanted to meet him later. She knew for sure that she would miss her uncle, even though she didn't show it. She promised that she would always remember him, despite everything that was happening around her. These words would remain with him as a memory of something important that was destined to happen. He couldn't understand how this little girl could know about such events as defeating the dragon. It was like a prophecy, but he couldn't believe it completely. The more the Duke thought about what was happening, the more it became clear that with every hour that passed, he was losing precious time. In this situation, delay was fraught with consequences. Perhaps if the girl really was a prophet, she could explain to him what he needed to do. He had to take her for her own safety and for Aiden's safety. The reasons why the current emperor became a usurper remained a mystery. He killed all the pretenders, but for some reason spared this child, leaving her alive. The Duke considered that despite all the dangers, he would have to take her with him. This decision was extremely risky, especially considering all the possible consequences. Taking her along was dangerous enough, even without taking into account all the risks and difficulties that could arise along the way. However, there were no other options. But what if Aiden dies like his sister because of the princess's actions? All this will be for naught if the girl is not a prophet, and her presence only brings conflict with the imperial family. The North could not openly oppose the current emperor. This step would be too dangerous and could lead to devastating consequences for the entire country. However, the Duke could not understand why he felt such a strong attraction to this girl. His affection for her remained a mystery that he could not solve. After a while, the girl began to slowly wake up. She couldn't understand what had changed because the ceiling now looked completely different, and the feeling was alien. After a long sleep, she began to stretch. The feeling of recovery made her feel better, but her head was still foggy. Everything seemed so strange and unfamiliar. The girl realized that she had not been reborn, as she might have thought. Instead, she had simply woken up, but she felt that her world had changed, as if everything around her was not the same as before. The nanny entered the room and asked how the princess had slept. The girl woke up, winced slightly, but did not express dissatisfaction. The nanny was concerned about her well-being. The girl felt how strange it all was. She thought about how exactly her life had changed. The nanny also noticed her strange behavior, but kept silent, preferring not to stir it up. The girl asked the nanny where she was now. Her eyes betrayed anxiety. In response, the nanny only sighed and said that they were in a safe place where she could rest. The nanny noted that the girl was a little frightened. She fell asleep so suddenly that she did not even understand how it happened. The Duke prepared a cozy corner for her so that she could rest. The girl had already heard talk about how they would soon leave this place. She couldn't understand why everything was so urgent, but her eyes reflected anxiety. The journey did not please her. The understanding that she had to get to the temple on time before the important event worried the girl. In order to do it before the dragon was at the gate, she had to do everything quickly and decisively. While the girl slept in the carriage, she did not notice how time was passing. She was absorbed in her thoughts, not paying attention to all the stops. The important thing was that she was safe. When the girl woke up, she was in shock. She couldn't understand what was happening, and it scared her. Her uncle had stunned her so much with his actions that she didn't know what to think. She also noticed that the fox was waiting for her. This was unusual because the little animal was always nearby, as if it sensed something. She did not yet know that many surprises awaited her in this world. The girl thought about how much the fox loved her. It was a strange affection, but she felt its sincerity. The fox was always there and always ready to support her in any situation. The fox came closer and cried out loudly that she needed food. She looked very hungry, and the girl could not help but notice her miserable appearance. All this filled her with even more anxiety. The princess felt strange. Her anger was a mystery to her. She could not understand what was happening to her, why her soul was filled with such tension that she could not get rid of. At that moment, she heard her stomach begin to rumble. Realizing that she was hungry, the princess admitted to herself that she really did want to eat, and her stomach turned out to be a pretty good indicator. The princess did not hide her desire, saying that she too was hungry. She began to feel her desires growing stronger, and they were displacing everything else, including anger. The fox slyly noted that the reason for the princess's hunger was that she had fallen asleep right during her meal. It was funny, but at the same time, it suited her strange mood. The fox, although also hungry, suggested that the princess quickly go to the kitchen. After all, they cannot continue to sit here when their tummies are growling, wanting at least a little food. The princess was a little surprised. She thought that everyone should have taken care of her food. It seemed strange. How could everyone around forget that she, as a princess, should be fed? Fox explained that she did not eat the food offered to her. She was too cautious to trust those who might slip her something. It was dangerous for her because she did not like to take risks. The fox insisted that she couldn't be trusted with food from ordinary people. Their hands could hide something more, which would make her vulnerable. She believed that it was better to avoid this, so as not to get into trouble. The girl mentally replied that her assistant would never do anything that could cause harm. He was always reliable, even if the sacred ones tried to catch him and deprive him of his freedom. The only one who could feed her without fear was her master. Only he could be the one who would take care of her safety and give her something she could eat without fear and doubt. She really took a long time to understand that she had to suffer so much. As time went on, she only realized how much this trauma had affected her life. In response, the girl smiled happily and said that she agreed. Then they all went to the table together to eat, and at that moment, her mood noticeably improved. Everyone was stunned when they saw the nanny carrying the princess in her arms. It was a sight that surprised even those who were already accustomed to unusual events. Joy filled everyone because they finally saw that the princess had woken up. This was a long-awaited moment, and now everyone was sure that she would recover. They began asking questions to find out if everything was all right with the princess. They began arguing about what treats and gifts they should offer her to please her. On this day, they prepared not only a lot of food for the princess, but also a whole range of gifts. The atmosphere was filled with joy because everyone wanted to express their care in their own way. In this case, the nanny can bring her food because she took care of all the preparations. All the things were already ready, and now all that was left was to wait for her reaction. The girl felt a huge gratitude for the attention. When she smiled, everyone immediately began to set out dishes and gifts so that the princess could enjoy everything that was prepared. The princess looked so cute that her image was like an angel. All her tenderness and innocence immediately attracted attention, and everyone could not help but admire her. The gentleman noticed that something strange had been happening since the morning. He tried to figure out what exactly was wrong, because there was an unusual atmosphere in the air that worried him. The girl was very happy to see her uncle. His appearance brought her joy, and she immediately felt cozy and calm next to him, like in childhood. But she was surprised when she noticed how he looked away. It was unusual because usually he was attentive to her, but now it seemed like he was hiding something. He said that he would have breakfast with her today, so they had to prepare everything as quickly as possible to make it to all the planned events. Everyone was stunned. The gentleman, so important and strict, would eat with the princess. This seemed unusual and not at all typical of his habits. The people interested in life at court could not hide their surprise. When the Duke turned around, they simply exchanged smiles. After all, they had not often seen him so open. He smiled back at them, and it was an unusual smile, so rare for the Duke. There was something warm and unusual in his eyes, something unusual for his usually stern image. The Duke told the servant that they would now have to put all the gifts in the luggage compartment of the carriage. His orders were clear and precise, as always in his actions. They understood that even if he had been the same knight as in the old legends, nothing would have changed his role in the life of the court, and the kingdom always remained the main one. They felt humiliated, as if their position in this society was less important. It was like a heavy burden that they could not throw off. The girl ate very well. She enjoyed every bite, but they kept offering her more, insisting that she eat more. The fox was also delighted with such a quantity of food, but her attention was absorbed by only one thing. She could eat as much as she wanted, without thinking about the consequences. The Duke told the girl to eat, and then they could go for a walk around the city. This was her chance to see new places and enjoy the walk in her uncle's company. They decided to visit the toy store again, which they hadn't had time to go to the day before, and now they had the opportunity to enjoy the shopping that the girl had long dreamed of. The girl was so happy that she quickly began to eat, as if trying to do everything at once. Her eyes were shining with joy, and she became even more enthusiastic with each passing moment. The Duke couldn't help but smile as he watched her reaction. It was so unusual for him to show open emotions, but the girl managed to make him feel differently. A little time passed, and now they were walking along the streets. The girl was completely delighted with the landscapes. She saw her eyes could not get enough of the beauty of the surrounding world. She hadn't expected the walk to be so unusual. In her mind, it was just a normal day off, but now a whole new world was opening up around her. There were so many people around her who helped and supported her at every step. There were countless helpers, and each of them offered their help and attention. The nanny, smiling, told the girl that there was a shop nearby full of wonderful flowers. It was not just beautiful, but magical, and attracted attention with its unusual atmosphere. The girl enjoyed having so many people around her. They constantly entertained her, played little games, and laughed with her, creating an atmosphere of joy and fun. She happily played with everyone who was around. Not only was it fun, but it also gave her great pleasure, as everyone treated her with love and attention. Some people entertained the girl with magic. Others gave her small gifts, which she happily accepted, enjoying every moment of her journey. Approaching one place, the girl suddenly pointed her finger to the side and said that she wanted to go there. Her request was clear, and everyone immediately understood where she wanted to go. She asked the nanny to buy her something special that she noticed. It was not just a wish, but a dream, and the girl was sure that it would be a real gift for her. A helmet appeared before them, and the nanny couldn't understand why the princess had chosen this one. Her surprise was obvious, but the girl seemed confident in her decision. In fact, the princess had a reason for doing so. In her second life, shortly before she was captured, she had experienced many things that had left a mark on her memory. When the soldier threw the helmet straight at her head, it didn't seem to make sense. She was still alive, and this act couldn't cause her death because she didn't die that easily. The helmet was similar to the one in the emperor's office. It was part of the world she knew, and in her memory, it became a symbol of a time that had already passed. Looking at this helmet, the princess again plunged into memories. That is why she wanted to buy it, because every element that reminded her of this made her feel connected to what had been. The girl, running enthusiastically towards the helmet, looked at it with interest. Her eyes were shining with delight. She could not tear her gaze away from the object that awakened so many memories in her. The fox, standing nearby, said with a smile that she would also like to take a closer look at the helmet. Her curiosity was understandable, because for her it was something new and unusual. The girl was a little surprised by the fox's question. She in turn could not help but wonder why the owner needed such a helmet. It seemed strange, but after all, everything has its own story. The fox began to laugh, noticing that the helmet didn't quite look like the ones that were usually sold in this shop. This comment was a subtle hint that the item looked unusual for such places. The princess's mistress asked the fox if she thought the helmet would be durable and long-lasting. The fox, having examined it carefully, replied that it looked quite ordinary to her, like any other object. Upon hearing the answer, the girl immediately ran up to her nanny. Desire was burning in her eyes, and she happily said that she really wanted to buy this helmet, despite the fox's doubts. The girl was determined she really wanted to put this helmet on her head. This desire seemed strange to her, but not so important that she would give it up. The knights stood there confused, discussing her request. They wondered why the girl was so eager to wear the helmet, as if it was something out of the ordinary. After much thought, they decided that they could afford to buy such a helmet too. It seemed that it would add to their special grandeur if they followed her example. However, the servants, seeing their intentions, were furious. They could not accept the fact that the knights wanted to imitate the princess and her unusual desire. One of the men remarked that he was a little uneasy about the situation. The helmet clearly belonged to the previous duchess, and this could be a bad omen. The girl's uncle was aware of everything that was happening. He couldn't help but notice that the duchess's blood was probably not mistaken after all, and was surprised that she had chosen this particular helmet. This silver helmet, decorated with an engraved dragon, was the symbol of the Duchess of Scarlet. It became an important attribute that held many memories of her time. The uncle, expressing doubt, asked whether the girl really intended to buy this particular helmet. She, in turn, confidently confirmed her desire. The girl added that perhaps it was her uncle who would be able to buy this helmet for her, believing that only he could fulfill her request. Uncle, hearing her words, said that it would depend on her answer. He was in no hurry to make a decision and wanted to understand how serious her intentions were. Uncle, not hiding his curiosity, asked why this particular helmet had caught her attention. He was interested in her motives, but did not expect an answer that would reveal more. The girl couldn't tell him about her second life, its meaning, and the origin of this attachment, so she simply answered that she chose him like this. She noticed that he seemed to want her attention, and that he was calling her again. This thought occurred to her as she listened for a moment to what was happening. Realizing that her uncle was already deep in thought, the girl couldn't help but notice that he was probably going to buy something. Apparently, it wasn't something small, but something significant. Memories of him fighting his own sister came back to him. She was wearing that helmet, which was an important moment for him at that time. Then Berg, not wanting to continue the fight, offered his sister a break. They were both children and knew how important it was to give yourself a little rest sometimes. But the sister immediately noticed that her brother lacked strength. His attempts were clearly unsuccessful, which was confirmed by her reaction. She could not hide her surprise. She smiled and pointed out that he might be taking the battle too seriously, which made him wonder if it was worth going on under these conditions. During the conversation, she asked him why he had brought the helmet with him. Her interest was genuine, and she could not understand her brother's motivation. The boy confidently replied that the helmet was really cool, and that his father had given it to him. This was an important explanation for the age they were at. However, Scarlet couldn't understand why he needed such an accessory if he had no skills. He confidently stated that his sister was simply jealous and wanted the same helmet. But the sister insisted that she didn't want someone else's helmet because she was already very happy with hers. It was a personal choice that she respected. All this was happening because he was constantly calling her. She felt it and knew that one day he would understand that he too would find himself in the same situation. The uncle was shocked when he heard the girl calmly say that she too felt the helmet calling her. This made him think about many things. The uncle smiled and said that everything was fine, and promised to buy the girl what she wanted. This did not bother him, and he was sure that he would fulfill her wish. The girl was amazed. She had never seen such a wonderful place. Everything around seemed unusual and exciting to her. The cook noticed that a real lady had come to them. His gaze was full of admiration, and he could not hide his surprise at her appearance. The girl replied that she would like strawberry and chocolate cakes as well as grape cakes. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she said this. She didn't say that she might not be able to eat that much, but she knew it would be best to choose only the tastiest and most favorite treats for her. The uncle, smiling reservedly, said that she should choose because he had promised to fulfill her wish and was now ready to do whatever she asked. He decided to buy everything she wanted and pay in cash. It was his decision, and he told the servant to do it properly. The servant, hearing the instructions, asked to pack all the cakes and treats so that they could be taken away. He was ready to carry out the order without delay. Uncle confirmed that they would pay in cash. It was decided, and no one could change his mind. Everything was going according to his plan. The girl was absolutely delighted. Her uncle seemed to her like a real master, a man who always keeps his promises and knows how to surprise. For her, he was the best uncle in the world. She loved him for his care and for the fact that he could always keep his promises. He kept his word, as he promised. The girl was sure that he would always be there for her, ready to help and fulfill any of her wishes. The fox said that the mistress had said that she wanted to please this man. She knew that her words had significance for the whole situation. It was the last village they stopped at before heading to the temple. It wasn't the best stop, but they decided to spend some time there anyway. The girl was trying to please her uncle, so she asked the maid to give her the bag, hoping it would impress him. In her eyes, it was an important step. Approaching her uncle, she timidly asked him to hug her, hoping that such a gesture would be pleasant. She wanted to feel his care, but did not know how best to express it. As she approached with a fork in her hand, the girl hoped that her uncle would accept her gift. She did not expect that such a simple action would cause such strange reactions from those around her. The girl just wanted to treat him, and the fox, watching her, understood her intentions. She wanted to please her uncle, but she should have thought about something else. The girl reflected that she hadn't spoon-fed anyone for a long time. It was her way of showing her care and attention, but apparently not everyone perceived it the way she had hoped. She was delighted, hoping that her gesture would evoke positive emotions in her uncle. She sincerely believed that he would appreciate her efforts and that it would strengthen their bond. Suddenly, everything fell to the floor, and the cake fell apart. The girl was confused, and everyone around was surprised, not understanding what exactly happened. Everyone was shocked and began to think that something strange had happened, as if someone had deliberately thrown away a piece of cake, not paying attention to what was happening. The girl was very upset because her intentions were pure. She wanted to treat her uncle and make his day a little brighter, but everything went wrong. In the eyes of those around him, it looked as if the Duke had dropped the cake on purpose. They began to doubt the sincerity of his actions, although he himself had not intended it. By neglecting the princess's attention, it looked as if the Duke had accidentally dropped a cake, although in fact nothing of the sort had happened. And then they noticed that one of the servants suddenly rushed towards the cake. His actions were quick and decisive, as if he could not allow the cake to go to waste. The servant started eating the cake from the floor, and the others tried to stop him. This sight shocked everyone because no one expected that someone would dare to do such a thing. The Duke was at a loss, not understanding what exactly was happening. Everything that was happening seemed absurd, and he could not understand the events that were happening since the situation was confusing to him. He turned to the girl and noticed that she looked upset. Something seemed to be bothering her, and this immediately alerted him, because she looked completely different from usual. The girl realized that the Duke might not like the cake, and that worried her. She felt that something had gone wrong, and this moment seemed tense to her. The nanny picked up the girl and hugged her, trying to comfort her. This was her usual behavior. When the little girl was worried, she was always ready to support her in difficult moments. But everything could have been simply said, and then all the problems would have been solved. However, the girl did not want to look pathetic and tried with all her might to hold back her tears. She carefully hid her feelings so as not to show how much she was upset by what was happening. It was important to her that no one would notice her weakness and sympathize with her. The Duke, feeling like a traitor, still could not believe that his actions could be perceived in the way they were interpreted by others. He could not understand where he had gone wrong. The uncle approached the chef and asked him to bake another fig cake. It was a strange request, since such a cake was considered quite rare and unusual, but he insisted on his own. The man was taken aback by the request, as figs were expensive and usually used in limited quantities. He expressed surprise, not understanding why another cake was needed. He explained that they only made one fig cake a day and would not be able to accommodate such a request. It would be impossible due to the high cost of the ingredients. The uncle was surprised. He did not expect such an answer. At that time, the girl was telling the nanny that she wanted to go home. She was tired and could not remain in such tension any longer. The nanny advised them to return to their quarters and rest a bit. She promised to prepare the fig cake later, as soon as the situation calmed down a bit, and they could discuss everything calmly. In the evening, all the servants began to wonder where the sorceress Ivina had disappeared to. It was a mysterious disappearance that left many questions unanswered. Before they left, they had to check everything carefully to make sure nothing was missing. Tomorrow promised to be a busy day, and it was important to prepare everything in advance. The girl came to the bakery and told the chef that she had a favor to ask of him. She couldn't wait any longer and decided to directly communicate her intentions in order to resolve the issues that had arisen. He tried again to explain that they only baked once. It seemed important, but each time he found that words could not express all that he felt. In response, the girl calmly said that if the problem was the lack of figs, then she had already solved that issue, as if it were something simple and easily remedied. She offered him a large quantity of figs and asked if that was enough. It was all so natural that he merely nodded, not quite understanding why it seemed so decisive. If there really was enough figs, he had to go to work quickly so that everything would be completed on time. This was already a familiar rhythm in their lives. At that moment, the Duke almost collided with the sorceress, Ivina. She seemed to appear out of nowhere, and he once again felt how difficult it was to control his life. Dima always loved the night air, and this time he was here precisely because of this. The silence of the night helped him relax and forget a little about everything that was happening around him. He remembered how the girl had been offended when the cake had fallen. It had been a long time ago, but the memory was as vivid as if it had happened just a few hours ago. Since she had ordered the cake, he decided to buy the helmet. It was a strange choice, but he thought it would solve some of his own problems. However, it was certainly not out of concern for the princess. His motives were much more complex and not entirely clear, even to himself. Just looking at the helmet, he began to remember old events that seemed forgotten. His thoughts went far back, and he was momentarily lost in his memories. The girl reminded him of his sister, and he behaved strangely precisely because of this resemblance. This created unusual feelings in him that he himself could not explain. He couldn't control the senseless emotions that arose in response to this similarity. With each passing moment, it became more and more difficult for him to hide his inner experiences. Anyway, I still had to buy a helmet. It was one of those moments where you just had to do it without thinking too much. The nanny picked up the girl in her arms, and the lady immediately realized that she was awake. It was obvious from the way she moved and the way her little smile was shining. The girl asked the maid where they were now, and she replied that everyone was preparing to leave. So she said that the mistress could continue sleeping and not worry. A cold wind blew outside, and somewhere in the distance, the neighing of horses could be heard, creating an atmosphere of morning silence. The girl felt as if she herself was already somewhere near the emperor, as if at that moment when they were so close that no words were needed. She was sure that their princess, like hers, would be able to live happily without her presence, because everything would be fine and she would be able to cope on her own. The girl noticed how the nights did not take her, and this made her wary, but at some point she realized that all this was just part of her destiny. She remembered moments when, because of this situation, she could not hold back her tears because the feelings were too strong, and she wanted to change everything. These were events that seemed to transport her to another life, and perhaps the memories of this have now become her invisible shadow. Everyone around them was thinking only about how to escape before dawn. hiding from something they could not understand or avoid. Then the nanny ran away, but she was caught. The girl was scared, not understanding what had happened. She tried to understand why her nanny decided to leave, but it was too late. The nanny did not understand why the princess was crying in her arms. She did not know what could have caused such a storm of emotions. The confusion and anxiety on the girl's face were obvious. She asked if the princess wanted to run away, but the answer was silent. The girl had no reason for this, but her reaction was strange. It was obvious that she was very scared. The servants said that they had decided to leave earlier than planned. Circumstances demanded a change. Time was of the essence, and it was necessary to act quickly. They didn't want to wake the princess, so they tried to pack quietly. She could sleep a little longer, and no one wanted to disturb her peaceful sleep. The moment was too important. It was very good that she was safe. The girl asked her nanny not to leave her, and she promised not to leave the princess, which gave her a feeling of calm and confidence. But the nanny smiled and asked where she could go. Not knowing what to answer, she stood next to the girl. Her words were filled with care and tenderness. She couldn't leave such a beautiful princess without support. The nanny promised to be there, no matter what. The girl felt her love and readiness to protect her. The nanny promised to always be by the princess's side and hugged her tightly. These words calmed the girl. She was sure that everything would be fine with her. Shushu decided that she would never lose her nanny again. She relied on her and felt safe, despite all the dangers surrounding them. When she entered the carriage and saw the fig cake there, her eyes lit up. It was a surprise that made her so happy. The admiration did not leave her. The girl was delighted, not expecting to see this cake. She looked at it with surprise, thinking that this could only happen in the happiest moments. In the chat, she saw Evina wondering if the princess had seen the cake. Evina, as always, was looking for confirmation that her favorite joy had been noticed. The girl considered herself a genius magician. If there were no figs for the cake, she could get anything. In her world, there was always a solution if something was missing. Despite the danger to her life due to exhaustion, she was ready to do everything for the princess. Her desire to help was stronger than any risks, even if it required her full dedication. Shushu was told by her nanny that she wanted to meet the sorceress. This wish surprised her because Shushu had always been a little hesitant about such meetings. They went after the sorceress, and in the meantime, the girl noticed her uncle in the window. His appearance attracted her attention, and she immediately wanted to say hello to him. The girl raised her hand to wave, but her uncle didn't even turn around. He just continued on his way, as if he hadn't noticed her. That moment gave her a strange feeling. He turned away, and her heart sank. Maybe it was because of what had happened yesterday, but she couldn't understand why he was avoiding her. She should be the one who was angry. Shushu was still uneasy. She decided that despite everything she had, to take the first step towards reconciliation. She had enough courage to do this despite her doubts. The servant approached the princess, holding a letter in his hands. He said that he had important news for her that needed to be conveyed urgently. He looked serious and worried. The Duke decided that he would travel alone from now on. This decision was unexpected, and the servant, having completed his task, reported it to the princess. The girl could not understand why this was so, and she was frightened. Her heart sank with anxiety. This news was like a bolt from the blue for her, and she did not know what to think. She thought that something had happened to the Duke. Maybe he was in trouble or sick. The event seemed terrible to her, and she was not sure how to behave. The servant explained that there had been a change in their schedule, which had forced the Duke to set out. The girl had not expected such a change to happen so quickly. The Duke and some of his men set out for the site of the dragon's subjugation. He left without giving any details, and the princess felt a growing sense of uneasiness creeping up on her. The girl got angry. She believed that if a person was going to leave a place, he should at least say goodbye. It was an elementary act of politeness. But her uncle did not say goodbye, and this increased her discontent even more. She began to think that he might have already become tired of caring about her and her whims. Perhaps her uncle didn't want to bother with her anymore. She felt that their relationship had changed, and it was painful for her. She couldn't understand the reason. The girl tried to calm down. She decided that all this could have been because of some small thing, perhaps an incident with a cake, which led to a misunderstanding. But even if that was true, she couldn't accept it. She still wanted to make peace with her uncle and go north with him, despite all the disagreements and misunderstandings. However, if she did not act quickly, she might miss her chance to change her uncle's mind. The girl understood that time was against her. The servant noticed that only the most experienced and loyal knights remained with the girl who could protect her in any situation. This should have calmed her down and relieved her worries. These knights had a clear order to protect her at any cost without regard for their own lives. It was not just a duty, but a matter of honor and loyalty. The girl wondered if her uncle had said something important, or if it was just his way of showing concern. She knew it was unlikely she would be able to establish a close relationship with him. He often behaved friendly with her, but it was only a pretense, so as not to upset the imperial family. The strong and powerful uncle hid his true feelings. During their journey, the girl could not get rid of heavy thoughts. She thought that this could be the end of their journey, but perhaps she was wrong, and there was still a chance. All her plans had collapsed. She could not understand what exactly had caused this turn of events. Uncertainty and confusion reigned within her. The girl decided that she needed to try to save the situation. She let it slip that the emperor was also aware of the situation, hoping that this would help her somehow. He knew that things could end very badly, but that didn't stop him. He was aware of the possible consequences, but the internal struggle continued to rage in his heart. She, despite all the difficulties, answered the questions regarding the Book of Names without any hesitation. It was her effort not to show her confusion and willpower. She just had to forget about him, leave it all behind. In the past, he hadn't been the one to really help, and now she was determined to start a new path without him. The problem was that the imperial family did not like her. She would have to return once she received the blessing from the temple, and this made her anxious and worried. She was once again in a situation where she had to think about her future, but the thought of the imperial family made her afraid. She didn't want to go back there. It filled her with horror. The fox, noticing her sadness, said that if trouble happens, she will be there and protect. There is no need to worry. Everything will be fine, despite all the trials that await her. The fox was the most beautiful and powerful creature among the divine beasts, and she understood her role. It was her nature to protect and be faithful to her chosen one. The girl believed that the fox would not leave her, and this was a source of comfort for her. She felt how important this support was, especially in such difficult moments. She hugged the fox tightly, feeling her warmth and support. This simple gesture contained all the strength that allowed her not to give up, despite all the worries and fears. The girl was already tired of always being abandoned. This feeling of loneliness haunted her, and it seemed she could not find salvation from this pain. The servant, turning to the master, asked if he was worried about the princess's condition. The question was direct, but reflected concern for her well-being, as is proper in such situations. In fact, the servant expected that he would be able to stay with the princess a little longer, but he noticed that the master apparently had no desire to leave her for long. The duke, hearing this question, looked at the servant, and with his characteristic calm, asked if he reminded himself of a person who was capable of experiencing emotions from such situations. The servant was a little taken aback by this question, instantly afraid that he might have misunderstood something. He hastened to answer that of course there was nothing wrong with it. In the duke's hands was a candy that had been given to him by the princess. It was a small gesture of attention, but in his hands it looked like a symbol of care and special treatment for her. The servant, noticing the tension on his master's face, turned to him in an apologetic tone, explaining that it was simply the overly serious expression on his face that made him feel unsure. He hoped that his remark was not connected with the fact that the master had left the princess. The servant tried to find an excuse for his anxious appearance, trying to avoid unnecessary questions. When he saw the Duke next to the princess, something changed inside him. It was a strange feeling that he couldn't immediately understand, but it was definitely there. He noticed that the Duke was at that moment showing concern for another person. For the first time so openly, his attention was directed only to the princess, which surprised everyone. He thought that perhaps everyone else felt the same way as he did. Everyone pulled out their long sticks and rode with the Duke, trying not to miss the chance. The reason for this behavior was clear. Everyone wanted to stay with the princess, longer enjoy her company, and communicate with her while they had the opportunity. A Taita dragon was not just a dangerous creature, it was a great opponent, and the Duke knew that in such a case, emotions must be kept under strict control. No matter how hard they tried to hide their feelings, it was clear that the Duke had become more sensitive, showing attention and concern towards the princess. The princess's nanny handed her the last of the candies. It was sweet. She always made sure the princess had everything she needed, and even a little more. The girl, seeing her nanny smiling, gave her one of the candies. It was a gesture of kindness that she wanted to share, despite her own love of sweets. He was absolutely delighted by this scene. It was incredibly sweet of her, and he couldn't help but notice how tenderly she treated her nanny. If the princess stays in this condition, she won't be able to eat much sweets, because health requires dietary restrictions. But for now, let the nanny enjoy it. It was obvious that the knights, as well as everyone around her, were ready to torment her. At this point, they could not afford to relax because a further test awaited everyone. Now was not the time to be sad. It was necessary to pack all the things as quickly as possible in order to get there on time. Time was running out, and every minute was worth its weight in gold. The magic bag that one of the servants gave her, although small, had an amazing property. It could hold a lot of things, which was incredibly convenient on the road. 3 days later, they had almost reached their destination. The journey had been long, but everyone knew that there was very little left, and they would soon be at the right place, tired but full of determination. The maid, who was constantly monitoring the route, announced that they would soon arrive at the temple. Everyone was excited because this meant that the long journey would soon be over. He hoped the princess was handling such long journeys well. The journey could be tiring for her, and he was worried about how she would cope with the ordeal. However, he noticed that the princess had started to cry. This upset him greatly, and he could not understand what exactly had touched her so much. It was hard to see her in tears. He couldn't help but ask why she was crying. He tried to calm her down, saying that he understood the reason for her sadness. They would have to say goodbye, and it was a difficult moment. The princess replied that she was fine, and that her tears were not because of the farewell. She tried to look calm, although it was clear that her worries still did not leave her. Then the princess was carefully picked up, and the sorceress, looking at her, said that she herself was very upset. She understood that the girl was worried and tried to support her. The sorceress promised that she would definitely return to the princess after subduing the dragon. She would do everything possible to complete her mission as soon as possible and bring her joy back. The girl, not fully believing the sorceress's words, asked if it was true. The sorceress smiled and confirmed, saying that she would take with her a fig cake that was the size of her head. She promised to return quickly to treat her to something tasty, because she knew how important such moments were for the girl. The promise was easy, but always meaningful to her. At that moment, her old life was left behind, as was everything that had come before. All that mattered now was a new beginning where much had to change. He was not the best person, and she understood it perfectly. But there was no resentment towards him, as if everything that happened did not concern her and did not leave a trace in her soul. She was happy being with him, and these moments gave her peace. She understood that the memories of such days would remain with her for the rest of her life in the brightest form. Now everyone had to hurry and move on to get to the temple as quickly as possible. Time was running out, and the important task could not be delayed. Suddenly, he noticed a carriage rushing towards them. and there was alarm in his voice. He ordered everyone to be ready and protect the princess because a threat could be close. No one understood who exactly was in this carriage because the face was hidden. The mysterious approach made everyone wary, and everyone felt that not everything was so simple. The girl couldn't understand what was happening either. The carriage was flying the flag of the imperial family, which only added to the strangeness. She couldn't help but be surprised that everything was so unexpected. The men had a hard time figuring out who they were and what they were doing there. The shouts demanded an explanation, but no one was in a hurry to give answers. The tension grew, and everyone waited to see what would happen next. They thought that this stranger in question might be the one who wanted to harm the princess or interfere in her affairs in some way. The man said that they must be prepared to sacrifice their lives for the sake of protection, as the importance of their mission required complete dedication. All this meant only one thing. They were obliged to protect the princess at any cost, regardless of the dangers and their own safety. Albrion, the commander of the Imperial Knights and Duke Willow's knight, was assigned to guard the princess. He introduced himself as the one who would look after her safety. Another commander of the Imperial Knights also introduced himself, which added to the seriousness of the situation, since they both had to keep an eye on the princess. From that moment on, the princess was under their protection. Everyone realized that she was now under the protection of high-class knights, including Albrion himself. In his previous life, Albrion was the one who caused the princess the most pain, and so it was difficult to understand why he was chosen for this mission. Among the two commanders of the Imperial Knights, one became famous for his reputation in subduing dragons and his victories in these battles. Another, Albrion, who is in the shadows, carries out the dirtiest and most difficult tasks. He is always close to the Emperor, and his main task is to control the hounds. These dogs are not only dangerous, but also watch for those who can threaten the safety of the Emperor. This dog came to accompany her on her journey. He has a bad reputation and is rumored to always be afraid of his name. This creates problems for everyone who is associated with him. She asked him with disbelief if he really was the commander of the Imperial Knights. His name was familiar to her, and she wanted to make sure of the truth of his words. He seemed too suspicious to her. As the commander had already said, he had been tasked with taking the princess under his wing and ensuring her safety. This was an important mission that he had to complete as quickly as possible, and without asking any questions. The servant remaining by his side asked him again if he was going to take the princess to the court itself. He understood his motivation and his desire to do his job, but he had his own doubts about the plan. But by the Duke's order, he had to take the princess to the temple first, as his duty required. He asked the servant to understand his situation and forgive him that his actions might not coincide with the servant's own wishes. It was completely incomprehensible why they couldn't come to an agreement. This led to all decisions about how to proceed being in the hands of other people. The princess could be taken away whenever they wanted. The one who was to accompany the princess was known as the Smiling Devil. His smile did not bode well, and many found it too sinister to trust him with such an important mission. He seemed to be trying to have a little fun, but it was clearly not the best idea. In his current mood, it would be best to avoid any confrontations with him if you don't want to get into trouble. The commander replied with a grin that if he thought the Duke was above the Emperor, he was deeply mistaken. Such arrogant thoughts had no place in their conversation. The girl was scared, not understanding at all what to do now. She was too small. She was not even 5 years old yet, and all the chaos that was happening did not give her peace. Now she has to endure ridicule and bullying again. All this happened because she tried too hard to get close to her uncle, forgetting about the possible consequences. Fear took possession of her heart. She was sure that she could not fall into their hands again. It would be terrible, and she did not know how to get out of this trap. The commander asked how much longer they were going to resist. He was ready to give them a chance, but time was running out, and the tension was growing with every second. He offered them one last chance to retreat before the consequences became irreparable. If they did not, he would be unable to call what was happening anything other than a mutiny. Apparently, there had been some misunderstanding, and they were now about to leave. He said he could take the carriage if they decided to continue on their way. The carriage was equipped with various amenities for the princess, and he knew that he had to at least take care of her comfort. It was his duty to provide for her needs, even in such situations. He didn't care about the prospect of punishment. The main thing was that the princess felt comfortable and calm. In his eyes, this was more important than any consequences of his actions. The commander, as it turned out, accepted the situation with favor. He resolved everything as the commander wanted and ordered one of the servants to immediately climb into the carriage without thinking. The girl felt anxious, but she could do nothing to help herself. This premonition did not give her peace, although she could not understand what exactly was bothering her and why it was bothering her so much. If the Duke had been there when she was a child, everything might have been different. Perhaps she wouldn't have had so many doubts and worries, and her life would have taken a completely different path. The girl was extremely upset. Saying goodbye to her maids is hard, because it was painful for everyone to let the princess go. This meeting was difficult for them and made them worry. The princess looked completely confused and tired. It was as if she was ready to immediately pay for her actions, not understanding why everything had suddenly escalated so much. This frightened those around her. Everyone around was in shock. No one could understand how the knight could let the princess go so easily. It was not just a step, but an act that made one wonder about his motives. The situation was scary and mysterious. The knight showed no respect for the princess. His behavior made people doubt his intentions and become wary. If it hadn't been for the knightly steel, they would have really cheated them, as they should, succumbing to the excitement. The situation was tense, and everyone felt that something was about to happen. However, the knight remained calm and said that they should not act frivolously. He reminded them that they should remember the Duke's words, that creating conflicts in the operation was unacceptable. This made the other servants feel disappointed, as they had hoped for more active action. The knight clarified that their main goal was to subdue the dragon, not just join the Duke. It was important to know the current location of the dragon in order to decide how to proceed and not miss the moment he had to inform the Duke about all the events that were happening. The system displayed the participants who had gone into the chat. There were 43 of them. This was a significant number because each of them was an important part of the process that was just beginning. Among those who connected were her old faithful servants, whom she had known for many years. This gave her confidence, because she trusted these people in the most difficult situations. They decided that they would not leave the princess, and once the dragon threat was gone, they would come back for her to protect her and be by her side no matter what. She remembered how they all loved her, and it filled her heart with warmth. That moment when you understand that you are not alone was especially important and touching for her. She was very pleased to hear all these words of support, and she could not hold back her tears. Such attention overwhelmed her emotions, and she was not ashamed of her tears. The servants were always so gentle and caring, especially the one who was always there, ready to fulfill promises and give hope in the most difficult moments. Ni, who often spoke of her beauty, and Roten, who was like a grandfather to her, remained by her side in the most difficult moments, supporting her with their presence and advice. Ivina and everyone else were forced to part with her. It was not easy, but everyone understood that it was inevitable. The farewell was filled with emotions, but there was a sense of loss. Each of them promised to meet again, but whether this promise would be fulfilled remained in question. Their paths diverged, and only time will tell what will happen next. Over time, the number of participants became fewer and fewer. One by one, they left this path, and their presence became rare. Only the memory of those who were nearby remained. They traveled further and further, and in the end, only 2 remained. Everyone else went about their business, leaving them alone on this journey. Rubes, feeling guilty for failing to protect the princess, expressed his apologies. He was willing to accept any punishment to atone for his mistake and regain her trust. In the end, the last participant remained her nanny. This was the woman who always took care of the princess and became her support in the most difficult moments of their lives. She asked the princess not to cry because their journey in the carriage was not easy. There were difficulties at every step, but she tried to support the girl so that she would feel at least a little relief. The girl continued to cry. Her tears were caused not so much by pain, but by the unexpectedness of what had happened. Her little heart could not understand why everything had happened this way. Everyone around was perplexed. How could the princess, who was supposed to be a symbol of strength and fortitude, endure such a moment so weakly? It was completely incomprehensible to them. I didn't start screaming, although I really wanted to. After all, she's still very little. She's not even 4 years old. And all this is a huge shock for her. Why can't they understand this? In response, they rudely told her that if she didn't want to get into trouble, she'd better keep quiet, otherwise she risked losing her tongue if she continued to behave like that. He quickly picked up the princess in his arms, apologizing for his abruptness. His words sounded genuinely concerned, but her pain was unbearable and difficult to hide. I was absolutely terrified, not knowing how to help. The commander suggested that she would be cramped in the carriage, so he suggested riding, hoping that she would be more comfortable that way. She felt a sharp pain and could hardly breathe. The sacred beast, watching her, asked if she was okay. He promised to protect her with his magic, but she had to endure it for a while. The girl, despite the words of comfort, was far from well. Her condition remained anxious, and her every breath seemed painful and heavy. It all seemed like a repeat of her past life, where she faced difficulties over and over again, not understanding how to cope with pain and fear. She couldn't get used to it. Fear gripped her heart. She looked for salvation, hoping that someone would notice her suffering and provide support, but there was no one around to protect her. There was a desperate look in her eyes, as if she was begging for help, but no one seemed to be going to intervene, and her loneliness only grew stronger. A few seconds later, her uncle appeared in the room and immediately picked her up in his arms. He was there, as always, when she needed support. The girl, still in shock, could not understand what had just happened. She was confused, and the world around her seemed different than before. When she saw her uncle, she didn't immediately realize it was him. Everything seemed so strange, as if time had stretched out and all the events were mixed up. The uncle apologized for his lateness, saying that despite everything he was there to help, he always looked for ways to comfort his niece in difficult times. At this time, other people also appeared, who immediately apologized and offered their services. They all somehow knew that she was in trouble and were ready to help. When she was called, she turned around, and a smile appeared on her face. She was glad to see familiar people, although she did not fully understand what was happening. She didn't fully understand why so many people willing to help appeared in her life. She always thought that all this was impossible, but now she began to doubt. There were people around who were ready to help, and her heart filled with gratitude. Everything seemed so strange, but at the same time, so incredibly right. The commander, noticing all that was happening, became very angry and asked what the Duke was doing there. His question was full of discontent and suspicion. The uncle, without losing his composure, calmly replied that he would like to know whether they could really put their lives at risk because of some stupidity. He added that if they dared to do this to the princess, they should understand that they would answer for their actions. It was not just a threat, but a solution to the situation. The commander became very angry. His face expressed anger. He said that if someone interfered in the affairs of the emperor, he would perceive it as the beginning of a war and would not allow such interference. The Duke, without losing his composure, chuckled. He replied that before deciding such serious matters, he would have to teach everyone good manners so that there would be no more misunderstandings. The knight, holding the girl tightly in his arms, looked up at the commander. He said that the Lord should allow him to teach a lesson to all those who were guilty of the incident with the hats. Duke Willow was known for having the finest knights and mages in his employ. If these forces were to be brought here, their strength and experience would help them achieve victory, leaving no chance for their enemies. In this conflict, the consequences will only be for those who started the quarrel, and they themselves will bear the brunt of the punishment. No harm will be done to anyone else in this situation. The Duke turned to his superiors, informing them that the incident would be reported to His Majesty immediately. This meant that the event would not go unnoticed. The Duke saw nothing wrong with this. He was sure that the situation had been exaggerated, which naturally caused even more irritation on the part of the commander, who did not agree with this approach. Today, they decided to retreat, not wanting to continue the confrontation. But in the future, as the Duke said, they will definitely meet again, and the situation will be resolved in a different way. He said he would see the princess again, perhaps sooner than they thought. It was a promise full of hidden threats, for the Duke was not a supporter of peaceful solutions. The girl stood in a corner, frightened by the whole situation. The commander, meanwhile, insisted that the princess be taken care of, carefully taking into account all possible risks to her safety. Uncle said that if they didn't want to lose their lousy tongue, they should be careful what they said, otherwise they might get into trouble. He emphasized this with seriousness. The commander, clearly confused, could not understand what was being said. His face expressed complete bewilderment, and he did not know how to react to such words. He simply fell silent. The Duke, in a reserved and firm tone, added that in future, the commander should avoid words like "their princess." This could not only save his life, but also help in difficult situations. The commander turned pale, his eyes filled with anxiety. He was scared, but gathering his courage, he promised that he would not forget this incident and would be more careful in the future. The Duke's knight, frustrated with the situation, said that he would very much like to deal with these people, but they simply tucked their tails between their legs and ran away, unable to answer the challenge. The girl asked her uncle if he would leave again. There was a lot of worry in her voice, as if she was worried about being alone again, without his protection. The Duke looked at the girl and noticed her fear. She was really upset, and his gaze softened when he saw how much she was worried. He asked her why she thought he could leave. His voice was calm, but there was a lot of concern in it. He wanted to understand her feelings. The girl said with a trembling voice that he had left her, and now she felt very lonely. Her eyes were full of tears, and she could not hide her grief. The uncle, overwhelmed with excitement, quickly grabbed the girl in his arms, not knowing what to do in such a situation. His face was full of amazement. He could not believe what was happening. The girl, with a joyful expression on her face, accepted his actions with delight. He held her for a long time, and then with a smile gave her a candy, causing even greater delight. She was very surprised when she noticed the candy in her uncle's hands, not expecting him to bring it at that moment. This added even more excitement to her heart. He reassured her by explaining that he had not thrown the candy, but had simply gone away for a while to find other sweets. His words made her trust him even more. It was impossible to laugh now, but everyone who was nearby was delighted with what was happening. The situation was tense, but at the same time full of surprise. The uncle took out some fig candies, and it was a real gift for the girl. She was surprised how thoughtfully he approached this moment, brought something unusual. The girl did not expect that her uncle would bring her not just a candy, but something so interesting. She believed him and did not doubt that he would not abandon her, even if it seemed possible. She, although she was a child, felt the real pain of separation. But at that moment she could not understand why they did not return for so long. However, now her heart was filled with happiness. The girl's gaze went to the sky, and at that moment she realized that her uncle had returned to her. Tears of joy filled her eyes, and she felt that everything had fallen into place. It was definitely not a dream, the girl thought, when the fox, noticing her, asked if she had opened her eyes. The fox was sure that the girl had lost consciousness and was now coming to her senses. The girl couldn't say exactly how much time had passed, perhaps 3 hours. Time had lost all meaning for her, since what was important was that her uncle was there. The situation was so unexpected that they found themselves near the temple before they could even comprehend how they had gotten there. Everything was happening too fast, but the feeling of safety was obvious. The gentleman's gaze was intense, and he noticed that something in the princess's behavior seemed strange. She shrank back as if something had frightened or disturbed her. At first, they thought that perhaps the princess had become cold. The temperature in the temple was always stable, but it was possible that she had felt cold for some reason. But it couldn't be because of the cold, because the temperature around the temple was always the same. It's strange why the princess reacted like that. However, the night had really scared the princess a lot, and it would have been logical to punish them for such behavior. But intervention could only make the situation worse. We considered using magic to track the knights, but it would be better not to repeat the previous mistakes and launch meteorites again. Evina believed that this was justice, not just the intervention of magic. She saw it as a justified action to restore justice. She was not only a student, but also a conqueror of her teacher Robin, whose methods and teachings left an indelible mark on her mind and heart. They received word that only a few people could enter the temple, and this restriction left them with a choice: whom to choose for the meeting. The girl, despite her fear, tried to hide her feelings. She did not admit that she was cold, but in a blanket, she would feel much better and calmer. Evina used magic to create a blanket that could help her stay warm. Her skill in magic allowed her to do this quickly and easily. The fox noticed that she resembled a ball of yarn twisted into a point, and this was somehow strange, because her movements were fast and dexterous, but still this resemblance was felt. The girl, seeing the fox's strange reaction, could not help but ask her uncle what kind of place they were going to visit, as she was curious to know more about it. Uncle, looking at her curious eyes, realized that she did not yet know what kind of place this was, and quietly, with a little excitement, said that this was a temple that they were visiting for a specific purpose. The girl immediately felt a familiar sensation, and immediately remembered that she had already been here more than once in a past life, and all these memories caused disgust in her. She didn't have a single good memory associated with this place, and as soon as she entered, the servant greeted her like a princess, which only increased her inner discontent. She felt strange, for although she was here for the first time in her life, her past feelings haunted her, and she responded to the Duke's greeting, feeling an unpleasant cold. The Duke was grateful that he was able to bring her here, but at the same time, he was constantly wondering why the lady had not brought up the topic of the priest's absence, which seemed strange. When they arrived, they were expected to be met by the priest himself, who was the head of this temple. But as it turned out, something had happened and he was not there to meet them. The girl's uncle, noticing the strange situation, asked the escorts where the priest had gone, since it was clear that something had gone wrong, and everyone hesitated, waiting for an answer. The people accompanying them reported that the priest had to leave his place urgently due to an unforeseen matter, and for this reason he could not meet them as planned. The girl felt fear as she found it difficult to understand how this could happen. She could not believe that the priest she was expecting was suddenly unavailable. She immediately realized that without the priest's blessing, it would be difficult for her to continue on her way.